Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Lore Lords. Today, we're on episode 24. I'm your host, Atlas. This is your host, Pat.
Hello.
And we're here to do a very, very big, great episode, one that I've been working on actually for a long time. Tonight, we're going to be talking everything Batman. Yes, that one. That guy. The guy with the cape.
The Cape Crusader.
This Lore Lords actually started about... I started working on this at the turn of the new year in like 2022.
Nice.
But it wasn't about Batman. It was just about DC Comics. And I kind of retooled this into a Batman-focused one after the release of The Batman, which just happened a week ago.
We will not be spoiling for those who want to know.
Yeah,
no spoilers.
No spoilers. I'm not spoiling it as much as I can this whole podcast. A couple comics are going to be spoiled a little bit, but even then, they're not not major ending spoilers. And it's just, Batman is everyone loves Batman.
It's true. And if you don't, you're wrong.
Yeah, basically. Like, who doesn't like Batman? Everyone likes Batman in some variation, be it campy, fun Batman, or be it super dark, edgy Batman.
That's what's kind of fun about Batman, is there are so many different adaptations of Batman that, there's one for you. I'm not a fan of the Batman with the assault rifle. People like that, I understand, but I'm in my Batman don't.
No, that's not Batman to me. That's not. I'm just saying that's not Batman.
That's Ben Affleck.
Yeah, that's been. I mean, he has that. That's based on a comic version, which I'm actually not going to talk about today. But it's a minor little comic version. It's just kind of nothing. There's so many great renditions of Batman, and I'm going to go over most of them. But we're also going to go a little bit into the DC Comics history.
Yeah.
Because it's also kind of necessary to build the world.
Yeah, I've been watching documentaries on all the Batman films and where they started lately too. So I also have been doing research by accident on this topic.
For the sake of time, I mean, I didn't go super deep into any of the movies because if you want to see the movies too, go watch the movies. That's a very easy thing to remedy yourself, is just go watch the movies.
Right.
And it's just this is a 13-page script. It's pretty goddamn long. So I try to focus a little on that, kind of giving out stats and numbers and actors kind of thing, more so than going into the plot or how it was made. So let's just start. Let's get into this. With part 1, The Birth of the Batman, as I called it, which we're going to go to the very beginning of the 1930s, where the comic book industry began becoming popular for the first time in the United States. And the reason it became popular the first time was basically as just escapism to get away from the Great Depression, which was happening.
Yep.
As well as this ever-looming guy in Europe named Hitler, who was causing problems. So people needed...
Heard of him?
Yeah. Not a good time. People needed a way to get away from all that. And so comics kind of took off, and comic artist became a profession for the first time in its own right, opposed to illustrator, who would work for newspapers drawing things and making ads, right?
Right.
Now, comic artists would strive for jobs at these newspapers because comic strips were the only form of comics at this time. So, we have today, they still exist, the funnies kind of thing?
Yeah.
Where there's little... that's where Garfield came from. Garfield still comes out in that kind of way, little...
It's true. That's pretty wild,
little comedic things. But back then, they weren't comedic. They were serious most of the time. They were serious stories that would have just, 7 panels, and the next week next day you get the newspaper and have 7 more panels, kind of thing, So they were a lot more broad back then. And when that actually changed to kind of when it is now was in the year 1934, because a man by the name of Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson founded a company called National Allied Publications. And what this company would do would publish American comic books, which was a crazy idea at the time, to have a book be nothing but comics.
Revolutionary.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah. So, people just saw it as 7 panels. And for what this guy did is he gave people basically the real estate to put their comic on multiple pages instead of 7 to 9, little squares in a comic. You know what I mean? Those few panels. They were now able to expand into a full story, basically.
Hell yeah.
And this magazine would come out. It was about the size of what you would now see as like a normal tabloid magazine. The same like dimensions, same style of paper. And the magazine would be called New Fun, the Big Comic Magazine.
Oh, that's kind of cute.
Which would later get renamed to More Fun Comics.
Also cute.
Yeah. In December 1935, the issue revealed the character named Dr. Occult, created by soon-to-be very famous comic book writer Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And this magical detective, Dr. Occult, would solve crimes involving witchcraft and other supernatural elements. Some people argue this is the first superhero. Not including like Greek mythology, like the Greek, like
sure.
like what we see in a comic book. This is people believe Dr. Occult to be that. I disagree, and I think the majority disagree. But it's still. I just want to put that out there.
But it's a cool almost like what like homage.
Yeah, well, it's also it's still important because this is the first time a comic book really broke realism. Like
Right.
It wasn't like a who killed the damsel. It was like this is a magic man doing magic things to solve magic plots.
Right.
But he didn't have a costume. He didn't fight crime necessarily. He didn't he just solved mysteries with a magical twist. That's all he did.
Cool.
But
It's neat. That's definitely
yeah,
neat.
it's neat, and he still exists too in the comic books. And what he would do, however, is start a trend, and this trend would be the interest in the audience wanting stories involving mysteries. And more comics would be made with plots similar to, or even copying, characters such as Agatha Christie's Poirot or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. Along those lines, there would be Sherlock Holmes little comic bits in these things. You know what I mean? Like actual, like him. So people were very liked the mystery of it in the 30s.
Sure.
But everything changed on February 17th, 1935, when a character known as the Phantom would arrive on the scene in a comic strip by Lee Falk. And this was a man in a costume, didn't have any powers or anything, but he would wear a full costume and fight crime with a secret identity and be the world's first superhero. Now this is what me and everyone else agrees with is the first superhero.
Yeah.
The Phantom, he still exists as well. You probably seen him. They made a movie, I think, in the early 90s or late 80s on him. It was terrible, but it's
Didn't see it. But
yeah. He's the Phantom is kind of he kind of came out, and this would prove extremely popular, and it would raise a large amount of demand for more characters who were like this, as well as more mystery stories. So Wheeler Nicholson, his next project, and which would end up being his final project, was the creation of a book called Detective Comics in 1936 in January. This would end up being printed 3 months late, though, and come out with a cover date of March 1937 due to issues with the... or 1936, sorry, March 1936, due to issues with the printing company. And this was a book that would be similar to the More Fun comic line, but exclusively be anthologies of detective stories. Those problems that caused the delay wouldn't leave the company, and in 1937 he was in major debt to a printing plant owner and magazine distributor named Harry Donenfeld, and he was forced to take Donenfeld on as a partner to publish Detective Comics, which would soon form a brand new company known as Detective Comics Inc. and would commonly be known as its abbreviated form, DC. So this was the start of the company we have today. This was 1937. DC's formed.
It's funny if you actually say Detective Comics to people today. Like a lot of people know what you're talking about. Like they're like, "Oh, you mean DC?" And you're like, "Yeah."
Yeah, but a lot of people also don't. A lot of people don't understand that DC means Detective Comics, and that this is what it comes from. Because DC is so many things. Like Superman's not a detective, so it's weird to say that. So. But even after this was founded, it had such big cash flow issues that Wheeler Nicholson himself would be forced out of the company and never work in comics again. And his name has now disappeared. We're not going to hear about him ever again.
Bye.
So shortly after this, DC would purchase the remains of National Allied Publications at a bankruptcy auction, which consolidated all their previous work under the umbrella of this new DC. So everything that had been worked on, like characters like Dr. Occult, back then, they're now all under this thing. And also, the Phantom at this time, I think, is when he gets also purchased by DC.
Gotcha.
So he's now part of this DC umbrella as well.
Cool. All right.
So DC would release their third anthology book in 1938, and this would be under the name Action Comics. This comic features a much less mystery story vibe and more of the day being saved vibe, similar to the adventures of the Phantom, and would sometimes feature the Phantom in them. But the main focus that was in every issue of Action Comics was the story of an alien who crashed into the small town of Smallville and was raised as a good old country American with a great values and impeccable moral compass to go on and save Metropolis day by day under the name of Superman.
Green Lantern.
Oh, no. Superman.
Obvi.
So,
Come on,
yeah,
guys.
this was Superman, and he was in every issue of Action Comics. You would find him. He was always the cover art. But you would also find stories from two recurring characters, the magician Zatara, and the Star-Spangled Tex Thompson, who would later be named as Americommando sometime in the 80s, I think. And this would sell better than any comic ever has before, and would change the way the world views comic books forever. Nice. Going from comedy and mystery to high action with capes and masks. And Action Comics #1, to this day, is the most valuable comic of all time, with selling at its highest at $3.2 million.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's a famous story too of a guy who broke into. They were moving, or they were contracting on a home. They were a contractor in their home, broke down a wall, and found an in-slip, perfect condition Action Comics 1 hidden in the drywall. Whoa. And I think that's the copy that sold for $3.2 million.
Jesus.
Because it was
so
yeah. Someone bought it, put it in a wall, probably died. This was a couple years ago, and it was still in its original plastic covering, completely sealed from the outside world, so it was untouched.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and so it's like that's in a museum somewhere, I believe, right now, and it's like the most, like the perfect copy, untouched.
Yeah, that's such an American thing.
Yeah,
that's so American.
And also I mentioned it before, Jerry Siegel, he is the guy who created Superman. So he went from Dr. Occult to Superman, which of course launched him as one of the most famous comic writers of all time.
Right.
So around the same time, the same year, a young teenager by the name of Bob Kane would come onto the scene working at DC, given a very, very large task to create his own popular follow-up to Superman.
Huh.
And he decided he was going to make a character that would be the dark to Superman's light, give him contrast and make him more unique. And he designed this character heavily based on the radio show The Shadow, which also was kind of a superhero. The character, yeah, he's a DC hero now, but back then he was just a radio show. He would base it off of the famous character we all know, Zorro.
Right.
And he would even draw artistic inspirations from the character off of Leonardo da Vinci's flying machine and gliding suit, which featured prominent bat wings. He worked with another writer named Bill Finger to create the character for Detective Comics issue number 27. And in this issue, a young boy named Bruce Wayne would be leaving the movie theater after seeing The Mask of Zorro in the fictional city of Gotham, and would witness the murder of his parents to a panicked gunman during a robbery, and then at that time vow to live his life warring against crime. Honing his body into a weapon and wearing a mask to hide his billionaire identity, he donned the cowl of the Batman.
Sorry.
So that's today's topic. We're now here. Batman exists. It's 1937. And
OG always been the same. His origin story has always been the same.
He's completely unchanged to this day. Probably the most well-known origin story in the world. I'd say him and Superman. Yeah. Him, Superman, and Spider-Man. Everyone knows their origin story.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I was going to say, those are the top three.
For sure. These early adventures would lay the foundations of the character being a playboy by day, detective by night. And during his first issue, we would also meet his friend Commissioner Gordon, who is the only other major character in issue 1 to now. So Gordon and Batman are the only two who have been here the entire time.
I love Gordon.
Gordon's great. It's his only friend. Gordon's his best friend. Other people are like family, but he's got his friend Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, they're buddies.
Yeah, and Batman would continue to solve crimes on his own until 1940 in Detective Comics issue 40, where he would visit and witness a circus trapeze accident that kills a mother and father, leaving their son an orphan. A story very similar to his own. Taking an interest in the case, Batman uncovers it was not an accident at all, but a sabotage trapeze rope by gangster Boss Zuko. Bruce Wayne would feel bad for this child and take on the young orphan named Dick Grayson as his ward, and he would join Batman in his Cape Crusades as Robin the Boy Wonder. And here begins the legacy and legend of Batman and Robin. So, everything before now is unrecognizable Batman. Like,
Right.
it's him literally solving, like, who broke into the jewelry store kind of stuff. Now that Robin is involved, Batman is truly beginning, which is why I've always been very vocal on my disappointment that Robin's not featured in any movies anymore. Like, Robin and Batman are the yin and yang of each other. Like, they are so integral to each other.
Yes.
And they've been there the whole time.
The last time we had a film adaptation with Robin, it was Batman and Robin, and we don't really talk about Batman and Robin.
Yeah, exactly. It's just Batman nowadays. Robin's kind of been thrown by the wayside, which is extremely unfortunate.
It is.
Because I am a huge Robin stan. But
Robin's great.
we're moving on to part 2 of the Golden Age. So I don't know if you're familiar with these terms. There's the Golden Age of comics, the Silver Age of comics, the Bronze Age of comics, and the Modern Age of comics in the last century. Do you know?
I've heard of like the Golden Age, like
Yeah.
people refer to it all like often.
Yeah, so the Golden Age is 1940 to 1956.
Okay.
Or 1955, I guess, properly. And this is what we're going to talk about now. When we start in the spring of 1940, in the first solo issue, Batman #1. And this comic, we've left Detective Comics, is still going on, but now we have
Right.
Batman. And the Batman comic would release featuring a story where Batman and Robin would meet two characters who will forever be a part of their story, the Joker and Catwoman.
A
Joker is introduced as a villain producing a list of people he will kill that Batman and Robin have to try to prevent. The Joker character, most of you probably know, but he is seen as pure chaos to Batman's order. This time it's much more tame in the Golden Age, but he's still a very chaotic murderer. Catwoman is a master thief who dresses up as a cat with a plan to steal the most valuable gems in Gotham during this time. Catwoman would be a long-time come-and-go villain, come-and-go hero, come-and-go love interest for Batman.
Yep. Anti-hero.
Yeah,
perhaps even.
yeah, very much. But the Joker will forever be known as the arch nemesis of the Batman.
Me and my old roommate David Frankel one time went on a giant rant to each other about how we are convinced that the Joker is one of the greatest villains, if not the greatest villain ever.
Absolutely,
created.
absolutely.
Like, yeah.
And we're gonna go through his evolution a lot in this
Oh,
episode. So you're gonna see his stages, which I love.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned before, Batman Detective Comics ran side by side, but the adventures of Batman and Robin in the Batman comics would introduce a host of the most classic Batman rogues, such as the Penguin, Two-Face, and the Riddler, whereas Detective Comics would focus more on those gritty crime dramas. Like, he would be searching for crime boss victims, he would be fighting the mob, that's where the Falcones and the Maronis come in.
Yep.
In April 1943, Batman issue number 16 introduced a character named Alfred Beagle, who would be put into the comics as a heavyset Englishman who would be the comic relief. And his style didn't even match that of the rest of the comic. He had a very round nose, a very round head, and he would follow the dynamic duo in an attempt to be an amateur detective, and failing at the attempt is a means of comic relief. Now, eventually issues went on, and he would become a much thinner version of himself, and eventually being renamed Alfred Pennyworth, and rewritten as the family butler to the Waynes, and serve as Batman's only family, and often assist him in his efforts to the Batcave. He still does, to this day, serve as a kind of comic relief, because he will often just make a remark as they fly away from him mid-sentence, kind of thing.
Yeah, he's very quick-witted, and he's
Yeah.
very used to this kind of Batman stuff.
Yeah, so that's kind of always been his thing, and it's much more dialed down now than it was, like, tripping on a piece of banana back then. But, like,
Right.
it's, it's still kind of, that's his root of being this kind of comic relief thing, which is an interesting thing that not a lot of people know about nowadays.
Well, it's also like a really great character dynamic too, because you have just about every single character in the Batman universe being either scared, shocked, or like in awe of Batman, and then you have Alfred, who's just kind of like, oh, well, there he goes again.
Yeah, he's his only family
very-
member.
Yeah.
Like, he's his assistant, and he helps him in the Batcave. And there's different versions of Alfred throughout the years. Some are much more willing to help him, some are not. It goes back and forth. In May of the same year, 1943, Batman would receive his first live-action appearance in the serial based on Batman, played by Lewis Wilson, alongside his ward Dick Grayson, or Robin, being played by Douglas Croft. They were secret government agents fighting against the Japanese during the height of World War II.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I
this
did not know about this.
this Batman, you can actually watch it on. I think it's on HBO. I think they have it.
way.
It is hilarious. This Batman is so low tech. but he's darker than other superheroes seen before in this serial, mostly because he's involved directly with the ongoing Second World War.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very well received as being a bit too fantastic a view of the horrors of the World War happening.
Yeah, I bet.
But later in 1949, 4 years after the war, Batman would come back in live action again in a new serial named Batman and Robin, which would be met with great success compared to the previous ones. So this was the war was over for 4 years, so the war's gone.
Right.
And this Batman was now in Gotham again. So it kind of went back to these comic book stories that people got much more into seeing it live action.
Yeah.
So serials were something you would see before a movie, by the way, just to clear that up. So these weren't like movies. These were like 20-minute things before movies. You would go to the movie, see a serial, and then the movie would start. So this is what these were, just to be clear. These weren't like full-length movies. These were serials that are about 25 minutes long.
I kind of wish we did that instead of the 20 minutes of ads.
That's exactly what it was. So that replaced the ads we have now. The trailers replaced it. Which, I mean, it's good to see what's coming. It's good to see what's out.
Yeah.
So
It's just
it's very long. It's very long.
So long.
So after this, Batman comics would sell extremely well and keep DC going, being second in sales to their star superhero, Superman. And Batman and DC wouldn't take their first hit until 1954. And this was the end of the Golden Age. And this happened when psychiatrist Frederick Wertham published his book Seduction of the Innocent, which stated 90% of all kids in reform schools read comics, therefore comics are destroying American youth and values, and American culture overall.
What a wonderful thing that continues today with video games.
He gets, it's just, it changes. It was in 1800s, it was just books. People were saying books were evil, and now it's gone to comic books. Went from to TV to movies to comic books, and he would go on to even blame asthma on comic books, saying children were staying inside all day reading comic books instead of breathing fresh air, giving them asthma.
Man, what a time.
Yeah. So that sounds dumb as hell now, but back then people believed it.
Oh,
and
sure.
this was a problem because this would be the first major hit to the big comic companies, being Marvel Comics, Charlton Comics, and DC Comics at the time, getting heavily hit. People stopped buying comics. And in response to this, the creation of the Comic Magazine Association of America would be the result. And this would be an organization that all comic books must go through to be censored for anything too violent or offensive.
Oh, God.
So this was a big hit to comics such as Batman, who were widely known as being the darkest comic of all time, and where you would go for your dark stories. And so that's the end of part 2, the Golden Age, where we're going to move on to part 3, which I titled The Silver Age Struggle Through to the Bronze Age Burnout. And this is after the creation of the Comic Magazine Association of America, known as the CMAA. Comics were forced to take a much blander approach. Batman was turned into a good American man and less of a dark knight, who would exist to work in civic duties such as cleaning the streets and stopping fights between mob members instead of fighting them.
Guys, break it up.
Basically,
If you work together, you could sell crack way more efficiently.
Yeah, so this comic era is known as the Silver Age, as I mentioned before, and it lasted from 56 to 69, when we were heavily censoring comic books. And during the Silver Age, the result of that censorship is that these comics are packed with science fiction and fantasy themes with Batman to get him away from this dark mob fighting version of himself.
Right.
And it started off with the creation of the Bat Family. So the Bat Family introduced the characters Batwoman, Batmite, Bat-Hound, and even the temporary, never-returned version of Batgirl. So this would prove to be extremely unpopular. Fans hated this. They didn't like these like goody-goody two-shoe family aspects of it, and sales would drop further. The character Kathy Kane, aka Batwoman, was introduced as a love interest for Bruce Wayne to combat the idea, which is directly mentioned in the Seduction of the Innocent book that Batman and Robin are in an underage homosexual relationship.
Oh dear.
So that they put in a woman for him to be his straight love, which
those memes are still going on today with the Batman and Robin.
Yeah, it's a lot less popular nowadays, but
right.
So that
because I think the fans really won out though in the end of being
yes, and also
it's ridiculous.
There's a whole generation of Robin fans, such as myself, and I think people around my age group that now we like Robin and we love Dick Grayson as a character. So it's like I'm not going to sit here and make fun of him.
Yeah, right.
Also, there is zero romantic inclination between them in any of the writing. It just doesn't exist.
I was gonna say that's why it's such a ridiculous stretch, is because there's no innuendo. There's nothing like
none.
that. It's just like, if anything, it's just like it's very father and son like, honestly.
Yeah, you know? And one of my favorite aspects of the Kathy Kane Batwoman being introduced is because Kathy Kane Batwoman is introduced as a straight love interest, right, for Bruce Wayne to make him seem less gay. In 2006, DC said "fuck you, CMAA" and reintroduced her as the Batwoman we have now as a gay character. And their first like gay character, like super open gay character, was Katie Kane Batwoman. So like they kind of like did this big like "fuck you guys," like look at this, she's back and she's gay as hell, you know, kind of thing.
She's so gay. Good for them, by the way.
Yeah. And the underage Batgirl and underage Robin kind of had a little flirty romance thing too, for the same reason. But this version of Batgirl was Kathy Kane Batwoman's daughter, and she was written out never to return in the future.
Yikes. Oops.
Next, we have The World's Finest Comic issue number 71 in the year 1955. And this comic series featured solo adventures of DC big heroes such as Batman and Superman. And we would see Batman and Robin team up with Superman for the first time.
That's cool.
This would prove extremely popular and be the top-selling DC comic since the Golden Age.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes.
Their contrast is perfect.
Yep, and they return in World's Finest issue number 88, where Lex Luthor would team up with the Joker and cause Superman and Batman and Robin to team up and take them down. This would prove so popular that this is officially the first ever team-up cross-comic event, too. So this is, which we all love nowadays. Like, you can see the Marvel Cinematic Universe exists because of team-ups. Like, people love it, and this is all where it comes from. This World's Finest comics issue. A fun thing I loved in this comic is this Batman has super strength. Never explained, never talked about, but the reason is to keep up with Superman. And this is the first time the comic superhero writing issue and normal writing issue, which is known as the Superman problem, would occur. Which is, how do you write a character alongside someone like Superman?
Yeah.
Who can just do everything better than he can. So it's like, it was an issue, and that was their response now. And as time goes on, it takes on a million different ways. But
right. Yeah, I was about to say that. They've solved that problem.
Not really, but they try. Well, I mean, there's different solutions every time.
I was going to say, I'm saying, all the way to the modern times of being, when you put Batman and Superman in a movie together, Batman is usually the one who steals the show over Superman.
Yeah, 100%.
The case.
Because it's such
not that I'm trying to take away anything about Superman. He's fantastic, obviously, but it's the God thing. It's like, well, how interesting can you make a guy who basically can't lose?
Yeah,
whereas
it's
Batman is just a guy.
So I know you're saying this because I'm a Superman fan, but
no, yeah.
that's why you said I'm not saying it. I get it. Listen, but the reason why, like you just said, Batman takes the show always is because you have to figure out, you have to see the way he wins, because otherwise that's the story, is how does Batman win? You know what I mean?
Right.
How does Batman keep up? The story, because Superman just does something, Batman's like, okay, now here's how he got there. So it's a much more interesting story, which is why that's a popular thing.
Right.
In 1955, we'd have another big similar issue in the DC comic Brave and the Bold. And this comic would originally be made to show stories of wild adventurous heroes such as the Shining Knight, the Viking Prince, and Robin Hood. And in its second volume would introduce a team of villains from various comics in various prisons such as Arkham Asylum that would be made to act as a team of heroes by having bombs put in their head called the Suicide Squad.
And that's pretty early.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people don't realize 1955 is when the Suicide Squad started.
I had no idea wow, that's so cool. Wow, that took a long time for Suicide Squad to
get popular.
Catch up.
Yeah, no, it's always been there. It's always been around. The third volume of the comic would be a world-changing event again. where the cast of the most popular DC heroes at the time, Aquaman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, The Atom, Hawkeye, Superman, Batman, and Robin, would team up to take down a threat, and in the end, create a group known as the Justice League of America.
Oh God, the last part's funny.
Of America.
Of America.
Just to be clear, I know Wonder Woman's from Europe and Aquaman's from Atlantis, but this is American, guys. And Hawkeye's from Egypt, I think. Or Hawkman, not Hawkeye. But anyway, this was huge. This was the first time like this. Avengers didn't start until 5 years later. So, like, this was the big...
Yeah.
Like, all these comic people are together. And this would take Batman into a more worldwide and less Gotham-centric street-level hero version of Batman and Robin.
Pretty great. You know, don't get me wrong, love Gotham, phenomenal setting, but it's nice to see your boy in a
place. It's cool, and it not only is cool, but it was a great way to get him away from dark Gotham comics that were being censored.
Right.
And it put Batman against major supervillains from Brainiac to the God of War Ares, fighting alongside these different characters like Wonder Woman and Superman. Despite his involvement and popularity in Justice League, we're jumping a lot further ahead because nothing really happened. It was just really boring comics. By 1964, Batman sales were at an all-time low.
Oh, no.
Interest in the character wasn't the same under the heavy censorship of the CMAA. DC almost decided to cancel Detective Comics and Batman that same year.
Jeez.
He was given a last-second chance when executives decided to give him his moment in the sun by bringing in legendary comic editor Julius Schwartz. If you don't know who that is, which I'm guessing you don't,
I do not.
Julius Schwartz was the Silver Age hero. He is known as the guy who was able to take these comics in the DC world that were falling into this family-friendly versions of themselves and bring them back into this stuff by skirting the rules of CMA as close as possible. He had relaunched The Atom, he had relaunched Hawkman, he had relaunched Justice League, and even The Flash. And he introduced Barry Allen, for example. He's the one who made Barry Allen the Flash. And he kind of got them over their family-friendly rules, like I just mentioned at this time. And Batman would be his next great project. And he would get introduced with a new design featuring his famous yellow circular bat icon on his chest. Turning his black cowl and gloves and boots a dark blue. Reintroducing heavy mystery into his comics. The Bat family was deleted and never talked about again. Batman and Robin would soon see themselves once again hitting the streets of Gotham, solving murders and catching characters such as the Riddler, Penguin, and of course the Joker. And this design would inspire his next major appearance, which would change the way Batman was viewed around the world.
Oh yeah, I think I know this one.
In 1965, the entire Batman serial that we talked about before was re-released theatrically under the name An Evening with Batman and Robin. And that's the easiest place to find it. Like, if you want to look it up, that's what you look for. Look for An Evening with Batman and Robin, and you'll probably find it.
It sounds like they're just sitting back in a nice library, sipping whiskey, and just being like, I'm Batman.
Let me tell you about some of my adventures. It's kind of like Howard intros. But it proved very popular. And this was put in actual movie theaters, not like serials before, so because they combined it all into one movie.
Hell yeah.
But the reason it was successful was not the intended reason. The 40s style action was seen as hilarious and caused rolling laughter among the audience, which spawned the next creation with an action comedy lampoon thriller starring Adam West as the Batman and Burt Ward as the Robin.
This is what I'm very familiar with.
Yes. So this show was just called Batman, and this brought this heavily campy. Firstly, this show was satire. It was meant purely a satire. They were making fun of how edgy Batman was. That was the joke, and it showed a very 100%. Batman was nobody at the time, so it was cool to make fun of him.
Right.
And it was a very campy and colorful and zany take on Batman and Gotham, which also was like the only time, even like today, that we've seen Gotham in sunlight.
Right.
It was massive, and it hit all over the world and spawned a huge Batman fandom.
I love the. There's also if you want to know how ridiculous it was, there's actually a common GIF that's used on the internet where Batman is carrying a gigantic bomb over his head and he's just running through like a crowd of people, and he just, what is it? He just throw it.
He throws it in the ocean. Yeah,
yeah, he just throws it in the ocean.
It's a big comedic bomb with like a big wick on fire on top of his head.
Yeah, he also has like anti-shark spray.
Yeah.
And stuff. It's very funny.
So many,
very
so many of the jokes of Batman come from this time, and that's where the whole Robin too. The holy cow, Batman! They look over and there's a cow with a hole in it. Like that's where that whole thing comes from. It was huge. It's funny. It's still ridiculous. It's even more ridiculous to look at nowadays because you can appreciate how dumb the 60s was at the same time. It already was making fun of the dumb 40s. So it's like double dumb now. It's great. And there was even a movie during the 1966, a full feature-length movie for the first time with Batman, starring Adam West. So that was big too, and it was huge. During the show's run, however, producer William Dozer, along with DC editor Julius Schwartz, and famed Batman writer from back in the 40s, Gardner Fox, and comic artist Carmine Fatino were given a task to create a female counterpart to fight alongside Batman and Robin. And this was done in Detective Comics issue number 359, which would be the $1 million debut of Batgirl, is the title. This revived the old character as a new version of herself, being Barbara Gordon, the daughter of Batman's longtime friend Commissioner Gordon.
Which I love that,
Yes,
by the way.
she is one of my favorite characters in Batman. I love Batgirl to death. Some of the best costumes, too, in the whole Bat family.
Oh, she is cool. Yeah.
That's why I loved her as a kid. I was like, her costume looks rad.
Hey, that's fine.
Yeah. In 1966, like I mentioned, the full movie of the Batman would come out, and they got their second season as well. But the next year, however, as fads tend to fade, the Batman fans of camp started to go away. The show would end up getting canceled in its third season after 26 episodes, as a cry from fans around the world, now being teenagers and young adults, wanted a more serious, older Batman, and DC heard this, and they would respond with the start of the Bronze Age. In Detective Comics number 395, The Secret of the Waiting Graves. The Bronze Age, compared to the Silver Age, is seen as extremely good. Like, the whole thing, people love the Bronze Age. And I do too.
Right.
Like, great comics came from the Bronze Age. And Batman was the starting of it. Detective Comics 95 launched the Bronze Age. And
What year was this?
This
Sorry,
was
75?
this was 1966.
66. Okay.
Sorry, 1969. Sorry, 1969. I'm wrong.
Okay.
69, yeah. 66 was the Batman show, which had ended in 69 and started the Bronze Age of comics.
Gotcha.
So writer Denny O'Neil and artist Neil Adams would work together. This would be their first combo and prove to be a massive hit. These guys are now legendary among comic writers and artists. Batman comics are selling higher than ever before due to the immense talent of these two people. O'Neill's Batman would show a more psychological and darker approach to Batman, showing the depths of his psyche and how not okay he is.
Yeah.
And it kind of was the death of the smiling 60s Batman that we know with his hands on his hips. That was dead and gone. We're now into dark, more modern style Batman. And Neil Adams, the artist, was not a comic book artist. He was a professional illustrator. And the result of this made his comic art being highly realistic and looking very modern. And this is a huge change in the very cartoonish, campy way of the 60s previously to now bring this very realistic looking comic out. And O'Neil, I have a quote here from O'Neil saying, quote, "I wanted to simply take it back to where it started. I went to the DC library and read the earliest stories of Batman and tried to get a sense of what Kane and Finger were after, and this is what I made." And he was very successful at that.
Right.
This is now the dawn of the 70s and the Bronze Age, and Batman is bigger than ever. A rise in sales and a change in art led to Batman tackling serious social issues for the first time. There's even a comic where he chases down Nazi war criminals. And making more dark comics in general. Other comics as well started getting a little bit affected by this too. But Detective Comics and Batman is where you would go now to read these dark stories. The first issue we already talked about, Detective Comics 95, The Secret of the Waiting Graves, would introduce a dark gothic theme to this new darker Batman, returning to its old roots of deep mystery, which is the very modern take we see still on Gotham to this day with the gargoyles and stuff.
Yeah.
That's where this came from. Before then, it was just another city. It was a very normal-looking New York clone. Now it has all these Gothic cathedrals and towers and stuff.
Which is for me very, as a kid, quintessential Gotham.
Yes, 100%. That's the look of Gotham you know.
Yeah. Like, I loved the Nolan trilogy and everything, but it was basically just Chicago.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So this, like, you're looking at these towering gargoyles, and almost every skyscraper looks like a cathedral.
Yeah, that's so cool.
You know, and you always see Batman standing on the gargoyle with the lightning strike in the background kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's where all that style comes from, is these 70s. That same year, 1970, we got Detective Comics number 400, which would see a new major villain introduced, who I am still waiting for his live-action appearance, the Man-Bat. Love Man-Bat, great villain.
I don't think I've ever heard of Man-Bat.
If you've seen the animated series, you've seen him. He's prevalent in it. He's half man, half bat, as opposed to Batman.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I
big,
do remember
big
this.
furry winged guy. Yeah, he's in it a lot. He's in a couple movies recently too, and comic series recently, but he's never been live acted. I get why, but like I would love to see it still. The next we got Batman number 3. Okay, also just for the record, for now on in this episode, I'm going to be going almost timeline wise through these decades and major comic events and movies. We're kind of leaving the DC overall history for now.
Yeah, that's fine.
So going through the 70s, Batman number 232 in 1971 would see the introduction of Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, deciding on how you want to pronounce it.
Either way is fine with me. I don't care.
Yeah. Also, I love you, Microsoft Word, for having that in your dictionary for some reason. Because I typoed it and it just auto-corrected to the correct spelling of Ra's al Ghul.
So whoever made Microsoft is a huge Batman fan.
Got it. Batman 234 that same year introduced Two-Face back into the comics, who is my personal favorite of all Batman's rogue gallery. In his more modern, extremely tragic background was introduced in 1971. Batman number 251 in 1973 would reintroduce the Joker back into the comics for the first time since the Silver Age, losing his overly comical 60s self with a water gun, changing it to an acid gun, and becoming a more psychotic and dark version to his current self, but not quite as severe as he is now. And he would return Detective Comics number 475 in 1978, titled The Laughing Fish. This is also the number 1 most viewed episode of the animated show. And this would prove to be one of the most popular Batman issues of all time to this day, like singular issues. And this is actually the comic that introduces Joker's iconic Joker gas.
Oh.
Where people start fishing up fish that he's testing the gas on. They're all smiling.
Yeah, yep.
And this was the last...
I remember that episode of the animated series.
I do too. I actually didn't make the connection until I was researching this. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a comic. I was like, I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But this would be the last major comic issue of the 70s as we move into the 80s. And the 80s would bring a massive change, not just to Batman, but to comics in general. And the 80s are the Batman stories that I grew up reading as a kid. My brother and I had a ton of comics. My dad collected comics, and he loved Batman, so we had a bunch of Batman comics in the 80s. So I was late, like I was born 92, but I would still be reading 80s comics as a kid.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, most of my content I consumed was 80s content.
Yeah, so this was the stuff I grew up on. And the start of the 80s continued Batman basically the same as the 70s with his dark self, but it did have a few comic events worth mentioning. In this time, Robin, for the first time, left Batman to focus on himself and his new team, the Titans.
I love the Titans.
Yeah, so this was young adult Dick Grayson. He's grown up now. This is when he has pants to the short shorts. And he didn't want to remain Batman's shadow, and Dick Grayson moves on, leads the team, the Titans, or the Teen Titans. I think they're originally called the Titans, but in the comics they refer to themselves as the Teen Titans. Because they're all still teenagers at the time.
Right.
Which led to Batman number 357, where a young boy named Jason Todd is successfully able to steal the tires off of the Batmobile when it's parked. And this is a feat so impressive that Batman decides to take this young orphan in, much like he did with Dick, and give him the mantle of the second Robin.
I love it how he just he just stole the tires off
Yeah,
the
and in the comic it explains the Batmobile has like a shield over it. Like it's like if you touch it, you get shocked. It's like you can't do that, and he managed to do it, and he's like 13 years old. So Batman's like, "Dang,
"Alright, kid."
you're good." And he actually mentions in the comic he does it to prevent him from becoming a supervillain in the future.
Yeah.
So
that
like
makes a lot of sense.
he's like, "You're gonna be dangerous, so you're coming with me," kind of thing. And so he becomes second Robin. And around this time, Batgirl also gets her own solo series and would appear much less with Batman. 1983, Charlton Comics, mentioned before, was failing horribly and got bought by DC Comics, which would bring in many characters that we see nowadays who would interact with Batman in the 80s, such as Ted Kord, the Blue Beetle, and the very now recently popular Peacemaker.
Oh.
Who was very different back then, I'll say that. 1984 would see the first major character change when Dick Grayson, inspired by the superhero he met adventuring with Superman on a weird version of Krypton in the past, the Nightwing, changes his name to Nightwing, and in the issue The Tales of the Teen Titans number 44.
I love Nightwing. Big fan.
Yes, Nightwing becomes Batman's most common team-up, but he would mostly be involved with the Titans and his own adventures. Nightwing had proved to be extremely popular with fans, and as you just mentioned, to this day, is still one of the most popular DC characters.
So cool, though. Like, his costume.
He looks
his fighting
great.
Style.
He is
So
great.
cool.
He's not as dour as Batman. Like,
Right.
he's much brighter than Batman.
Oh,
but
yeah, for sure.
he has to deal with these super dark situations. So it's a very different take. The comics of Nightwing are just as dark as Batman. But you now see it from a different point of view entirely.
Right.
And 1985 would see the end of the Bronze Age and the beginning of the modern age, which is going on to this day.
Yep.
So what happened is mainly the CMAA got taken over by new leadership, and they loosened their grip extremely and would only censor things that basically are the extreme offenses we see today, like
Yeah.
racial slurs and bigotry and stuff like that.
Sure.
Which this ushered in a mass comic genre explosion where you could find new writers and new artists, issue to issue, new genres from horror to fantasy, everywhere you looked.
Yeah.
But the modern age is said to be started by one specific comic, and that is the famous DC comic event called the Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh, I know this one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big
Yeah.
flyer.
So in Flash issue number 123 in 1961, during the Silver Age, Silver Age Flash met Golden Age Flash. And this established the concept of DC's multiverse, where they both ran on the plot is they both ran so fast on opposite sides of the same wall in different universes that they merged universes for a moment and met each other.
Neat.
And now what this means is basically every comic that we've had since the 40s exists in some form in this shared space of a multiverse between the comics. And this was seen as generally too complicated for people to grasp.
Wow. Fast forward to today, and the multiverse is just like the thing to do.
Yeah, 100%. In the Bronze Age, the writer Marv Wolfman, who got very popular for writing the story Weird War Tales, as well as the New Teen Titans, along with artist George Perez, who illustrated the Teen Titans, introduced a character who is a very shadowy, mysterious character known as the Monitor in New Teen Titans number 21. In July 1982, which built the foundation for Crisis on the Infinite Earths. And this idea was set in stone when Marv Wolfman, who was editing Green Lantern at the time, got a letter from a fan. And this letter from a fan asked why a character did not recognize the Green Lantern when they had met just a few issues ago. And the reason why is because this was them being from different universes' Green Lanterns. And at this moment, Marv realized that this is way too convoluted for people to follow. Like, there's just too many different versions of characters, compared to Marvel Comics' singular timeline, which was becoming very popular with comics such as Avengers and X-Men, where team-ups were able to be flawlessly followed because it was a very sensical, singular world from all the way back in the 30s. And this is when DC gave the go for Crisis on Infinite Earths, which would be an event to merge the multiverse into a more singular world. And this series would run from April 1985 to March 1986, running for 12 issues. Not going to go into it now. That could be its whole episode.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to talk about the plot, because Batman is not involved. This comic was a bestseller and is one of DC's biggest turning points. and had most of DC's comics put into one world, and almost every comic character, including Batman and Robin, were present. However, Batman's only involvement was making one phone call to organize a JLA together, because he simply wasn't up to snuff to deal with the cosmic grand threats at the time.
Right. Yep.
So
that's a shame.
Yeah, kind of put everything together, but this would usher in a new age of not only comic books but Batman from this era on. On our next part in 1986, where we see the release of the legendary comic book, The Dark Knight Returns. So I don't know. Have you read this book?
I have not. I've not read most. I have not read most things in general.
Okay.
I'm not really a reader.
So there's an animation too, which I recommend checking out. It's a 2-part animation. This is the most legendary Batman comic of all time, and I feel confident saying that. This was written by Frank Miller, which would also turn him into a legend. And I read this comic repeatedly as a kid. We had it in the full novel format, graphic novel format. And this is still among many people's favorite comics, including myself. It still holds up fully to this day. I'd
like to read it. By the way, I like reading. I don't sound like an asshole dummy.
No, I get it. Not everyone reads comic. It's very normal for people not to read comic books, but only consume them via cartoons and movies.
Yeah,
comic books are still to this day kind of a niche thing. The books themselves, the characters, no, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
But this would be a 4-issue comic series from February to June of 1986, and it would tell the story of a 55-year-old Bruce Wayne returning from retirement as Batman once again to fight crime in Gotham after it reaches an all-time high. And he would face heavy opposition from the Gotham police force, who have made vigilantism illegal, as well as the United States government. Well, I mean, more illegal, like superheroes were illegal. It includes favorite characters such as Two-Face and Joker as the villains, as well as heroes such as Green Arrow and Superman. This was the darkest interpretation of Batman we have seen to this almost to this day. Like, he is really dark, and this Batman is the inspiration for Ben Affleck's Batman in the future, which we had in 2016. And this is also the darkest appearance of Superman, because this would break the flamboyant, fantastic Superman, showing him to be very real, and have him enter in a full-out brawl on the orders of the President of the United States to fight a kryptonite-empowered Superman.
Oh, okay.
Who's his former best friend. And it's showing Superman being completely torn up doing this, as well as questioning if the U.S. government is good if he's being asked to do this. However, it does end with Superman killing Batman. Frank Miller is known for his unwillingness to power down Superman for this fight, and is quoted saying, quote, "There is an attempt to bring superficial realism and reality to superheroes, which is ultimately kind of stupid. I don't want to see sweat patches in Superman's pits. I want to see Superman fly."
Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's perspective.
Even what I just told you is not a spoiler for the comic fully.
Right.
So I would recommend reading it. I'm not going to go any more detail on The Dark Knight Returns. But The Dark Knight Returns was the darkest the world had ever seen Batman go, putting him in a dystopian near future where all hope is lost, fighting a hopeless battle against the Superman. Superman. He knows he can't win. And he says in the comic, he's like, "I'm dead. Like, I can't fight Clark. Like, this is ridiculous."
Yeah.
Reception of this book was off the chart, and it's said to be fully responsible for Batman's popularity to this day.
Wow.
This would forever also mark Frank Miller as a legend in comic book writing who continues writing today.
Oh, yeah.
Making great comics. He most recently did Superman Year One, which I absolutely love. He did that in 2019. Great comic. He was hired right after this again by DC due to the success to write Batman Year One. Have you heard of this one?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I've heard of most of these, honestly.
Yeah. Batman Year One's pretty popular. Again, didn't reach the height of Dark Knight Returns, but almost did. Extremely popular, and the difference is this wasn't a graphic novel. This was actually in the main comic series on Batman issue 404 in February 1987 to Batman issue 407 in May 1987. And this would tell the story of Batman's first year fighting crime and introducing many of his rogues gallery in this post-Infinite Crisis world, kind of establishing a new canon, you know what I mean, for like his first year. And that story is what's used to this day, basically, as like his year one. It would prove to be a massive hit and put Batman for the first time above Superman on DC's charts.
Wow.
continuing Batman's storyline from the main comics we talked about before with all that in 1988, in Batman issue 424, Jason Todd is seen breaking Batman's no-kill rule and lies to Batman about it. This made him very unpopular with fans, as well as his snotty, rebellious attitude. And in Batman number 427 in December of 1988, Todd gets captured by the Joker and beaten relentlessly with a crowbar. Batman is seen running towards the Reach Robin, and the warehouse explodes in the end of the issue.
Yeah.
This was a major DC comic event known as the phone stunt, or telephone stunt in some places. So the last page of the issue warned readers that Jason Todd could die from this, but they can save him. And the page listed 2 900 telephone numbers. One line, let Robin live, the other, let Robin die. Readers would hit the lines extremely hard voting for this outcome and would have 3 days to do it, and the lines were active for 35 hours after the release of the issue.
Jesus Christ.
The writer,
so cool.
yeah, it's crazy. The writer Jim Starlin had to write 2 issues, which he did. They were ready, 2 separate issues, that prepared for the outcome of this being Batman number 428. Phone results were checked every 90 minutes, and in the end, the poll would receive 10,614 votes, with 5,271 for survival and 5,343 for his death, sealing the fate of the second Robin, Jason Todd, who was revealed the next issue with the cover art of dead Jason Todd.
That's so cool. I
Jason
knew about all of his death. I did not know about the voting.
Yeah, no, that's I love the story. The fact that the audience chose to kill Jason Todd.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking brutal. Way to go, psychopaths! You're all a bunch of lunatics.
Yeah, want a new character in there, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
We're going to go through 2 other major landmark comics of the 1980s, which is Grant Morrison, who is my second favorite comic book artist of all time, of all time. His comic, Arkham Asylum, and Alan Moore's comic, famous for Watchmen, his comic, The Killing Joke.
Oh, yeah.
So, Arkham Asylum tells the story of the Batman entering the asylum after word that the Joker has taken over Arkham, and he would go into the asylum itself to stop him, and would be the inspiration for the future video game Batman Arkham Asylum. Yeah. I'm not going to even talk about the plot of that, because it is hard to do without spoiling anything. I really recommend reading Arkham Asylum. It is a very good comic. Not the same plot as the game, by the way. Different plot entirely. But so it's very good. You don't know what's coming. It's a great mystery story. It's super like twist and turn and left and right. Like you keep getting turned in your ass to what the fuck's going on. Killing Joke. Now, you reacted, so I know you know what Killing Joke is.
Yeah.
This is perhaps one of the most famous Batman comics of all time, next to Dark Knight Returns. And this begins with an unnamed engineer quitting their job to become a stand-up comedian and failing. Desperate to support his pregnant wife, he agrees to guide 2 criminals through a chemical plant called Ace Chemicals he used to work at so they can rob the playing card company next to it. Police surround them during this, and the Batman shows up, and they inform him that his wife and unborn child had just recently died in a household accident. The engineer turns to run away, but the criminals convince and strong-arm him to stay on the job, and eventually they get shot by police when the Batman confronts the runaway engineer, who, terrified of Batman, jumps into a container nearby and gets out the other end, discovering his skin has been bleached white, his lips red, and his hair green, showing the birth of the Joker. This was the first ever Joker origin story. We had never seen anything about him beforehand.
Yeah.
So, Joker was here. This is the famous comic scene where at the beginning of the comic, he visits Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, in civilian clothes at Commissioner Gordon's house. He doesn't know she's Batgirl. Right. But he visits and shoots her in the spine, kidnapping her father, which marks the end of Batgirl Barbara Gordon for quite some time as she becomes paralyzed from the waist down.
Is that when she becomes Oracle?
Yes. This is the birth of Batgirl to Oracle. Now, this comic is famous for having a comic be about the Joker more so than Batman for the first time. And this is kind of seen as the Joker comics. The events of this 80s... the events of the 80s include these very dark graphic novels, would change the industry of how Batman was seen as the cool hero, not the kid-friendly one from the 60s and 70s, you know?
Yeah.
He's now getting really dark and bloody. And this would be further bolstered by the 1989 huge hit from Batman, rounding out the decade in a big way with Tim Burton's feature film, Batman. Starring Michael Keaton, who at the time was a very controversial pick. People did not like him as Batman.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
because he was a comedic actor.
right.
He was in comedy stuff. People are like, "You're gonna put that guy as Batman? Like that's dumb. Like Batman's dark and serious." But that would once the movie came out, that opinion would change.
Oh, yeah, big time.
And he would go against the Joker, played by Jack Nicholson. So
very unique, actually a very unique take on the Joker.
Yes, he's a very 40s style Joker.
Yes. Yeah,
He's a very gangster Joker. The inspiration for this would come from Dark Knight Returns and Killing Joke specifically. Tim Burton is known to have been carrying around a copy of The Killing Joke with him during the creation of the movie.
Oh.
And in meetings, he would pull the book out and point to it and say, "This is what I want in this movie."
That's really cool.
The film had caused the biggest boost in comic sales ever for DC, where they even were having a problem sourcing enough paper to sell their books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So comics were on an all-time high at this point. And during this, the movie came out. It was doing great. It made $411.6 million in total gross. It also had a rating average of 7.5 out of 10.
Yep. I like the movie too.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I love it.
It is, yeah.
I still do.
Jack Nicholson's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. It's still great. It holds up today to go back and watch.
Oh yeah, definitely.
This movie made Batman the top superhero in the world going into the 90s, which was a major period for superheroes. The 90s was huge.
Oh yeah,
bunch of stuff happened in the 90s.
Oh, big time. Yeah, big time.
During the movies,
were born.
Yeah, well, I was born. Yeah, we're going to talk about that very soon, actually, because I was born during a major Batman event. During this movie's run in the comics, a character named Tim Drake would discover the identity of the Batman, as well as break into the Batcave on his own. And when found by the Batman in the Batcave, he would be given the suit to become the third Robin. So this is now we're on Robin number going in the 90s. In the main comic line, I put that in there just so you know Tim Drake exists. He's the third Robin. He's a very popular version of Robin. And we're going to actually start off the 90s immediately in part 5 of the 90s with the Robin comic. Because in January 1991, we saw the first ever solo Robin comic, Robin issue number 1.
Neat.
This would feature Tim Drake's Robin being a much more modern-looking version of Robin. The short shorts are gone.
Again, very thankful for that.
Because Jason Todd had the short shorts, but this Tim Drake's not.
Oh, yeah.
Going on a solo adventure, trying to prove himself good enough to fight alongside the Batman. I think it's important to note at this time that Tim Drake's Robin is much older than Dick or Jason was when they started. He's already in his late teens. Batman comics continued to fly off shelves in the wake of this film. People loved Batman. He was number 1 in the world this time for comics. So what would you do in this time but make a sequel?
Yeah, of course.
So Tim Burton did. In hype June of 1922, when I was days before I was born, on June 16th, The Batman Returns, starring Michael Keaton, would release. Going against the villains of the Penguin, played by Danny DeVito, and Catwoman, played by Michelle Pfeiffer.
Probably one of the best depictions of Catwoman.
Agreed.
Also, like, her story in that is so fucking good because she. Oh, I'm not going to go into spoilers. Well,
yeah.
I mean, this movie came out in '92, guys.
Yeah, we can talk spoilers for these movies.
Yeah. Again, she. Because her character starts off as basically like this very submissive. She's got stepped on by her boss, basically.
Yeah.
And then she comes into her own, and it's so cool. And it's one of the best ones. Yeah.
And I love Catwoman as a character, so that was huge for me to see that.
Was this Selena Kyle though?
Yeah, Selena Kyle.
Okay, because sometimes I know some of the Catwoman adaptations, like the god awful garbage, trash, poop steaming pile of shit that is the Halle Berry.
That we are not going to talk about.
No. That's all that we'll mention. But
I did not mention it in this thing. People do adamantly defend it. Sure, I'm sure it has fans, but I hated it.
I hated it too.
The other big, not just Catwoman, but Danny DeVito's Penguin is legendary.
Oh yeah,
he did the Penguin laugh that we all know that took off after that movie. That was a thing because of this movie. This movie had a budget of $18 million and would gross only $266.9 million, which compared to the $411.6 million of the original, that's almost half as much. But I think it's better. First, just officially, I think it's a better movie.
I think it's a better movie.
It's a Christmas movie too, which I love. Even though it came out in June, it's a Christmas movie.
It's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, it was still seen as a hit, however, ratings wise, with average of 7 out of 10, and it would further push Batman off the shelf.
I saw a wonderful take on it actually on Twitter today, because people were talking about the new Batman movie being quote unquote controversial for whatever reason, and they were talking about how like somebody was trying to point out that like Batman's always been controversial, and they were talking about how like there was this little kid that was like, this movie's way too dark for kids because the Penguin uses things that kids like clowns and
I've seen that clip,
yeah, and then it's just kind of like, that kid's an idiot, and it's just basically describing how he would have fallen for the Penguin's plot. Good job, kid.
100%.
Dumb idiot.
I don't want my toy duck to explode. Yeah. It did have a bit of that. Literally, what you said I was going to say next. Like when it came off, it did sell a lot more Batman comics, but it was seen as too dark.
Yep.
The Penguin was seen as gross. The Catwoman was seen as this BDSM heroine to a lot of people. Like it was.
Yeah.
She is 100%. She uses a whip. It was it was a very interesting release. But it still did relatively well.
Yeah, because the characters were fucking believable. It was good writing.
And maybe even,
honestly, I won't even say it's the worst part of the movie, but like the least interesting part is probably Michael Keaton's Batman.
Yeah, honestly, it's more about which he's in it a lot less too. You see a lot of the villains on their own in this movie for the first time, so I think it kind of it focuses more on them and less on Batman.
Right.
And maybe the best effect of this would be what it spawned after, on September 5th of 1992. When Bruce Timm's legendary Batman the Animated Series would release.
Yes.
So this was directly inspired by Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah, that is my childhood.
Yes, this is my childhood too. Like I grew up watching this cartoon every day.
Do you remember Mask of the Phantasm?
I love, Mask of the Phantasm, great movie. We're not gonna talk about the movie itself, but we are gonna talk about a little bit of it at the end, actually.
Sure.
Great. So Bruce Timm's Batman Animated Series would become one of the biggest Batman influences, and what many kids like us, we just said, grew up on. And this version of Batman would star Kevin Conroy voicing the Batman and featuring a wide cast of villains, including the now very famous Mark Hamill Joker.
So good job. Yeah, like it's so great.
Who thought Luke Skywalker? Yeah.
Oh my, yeah, exactly. It's Luke Skywalker for those who don't know the name, but like, which is so funny to think about. It's just like, what did he do after Star Wars? Well, he played probably the most psychotic and best arguably best adaptation.
For the record, if you want to make a movie studios out there, and you listen to this of The Dark Knight Returns, like to movie film, and you want Old Man Joker, get Mark Hamill.
Oh yeah, he would do it too.
Yeah, 100% he would do it.
Yeah, he loves the Joker. He's stated as one of his favorite projects he's ever worked on is playing the Joker.
Yeah. So this was heavily inspired by Tim Burton's Batman, but it didn't have the same look. They went with a very Art Deco noir-esque Gotham, but it did still follow a darker tone, especially for comparing it to other kids' cartoons at the time. It had a large amount of violence.
There was I think it was the first cartoon that really showed excessive gun violence.
Yeah, it was famous for that. Yeah, the other show,
the cartoons. Yeah, go ahead.
There was another cartoon that ran in tandem with this, which I'm just bringing this off the top of my head. It's not even in my script, which was the Superman animated series, and they did cross over.
I still like that too.
Multiple times.
Still good.
And it was given like the green light after the animated series because they were afraid of showing Batman or Superman getting shot and how people would react to it, like bullets bouncing off of him, right? But still, the amount of guns was seen as something risky, and Batman the animated series are like, oh, okay, let's put it out. So,
oh, fuck it then. All right.
Yeah. And yeah, that was the Batman animated series was huge. The next year, which was still during the Batman animated series, 1993, we saw the comic story The Batman Adventures Mad Love release, which introduced the previously original character of the animated series, Harley Quinn, into the comics for the first time.
That's right. Yep.
So she was the first character to go from screen to comics, not the other way around. And this version of her sees her leave Joker and become an independent woman for the first time. And if you're a fan of Harley Quinn, read this comic. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
The next major comic of the 90s would be Nightfall in 1994. So I grew up actually having this book. My brother loves Nightfall, and I think he still has his copy of it. And I grew up reading this on repeat as a kid, so this is very close to me. A lot of people have forgotten this comic exists.
No, I know.
Except for one major event. But outside of that, there's other things. So Nightfall would see the introduction of two major Batman characters. The first was Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael, who was introduced in Batman, The Sword of Azrael, #1, in October 1992. The second would be the villain Bane, introduced in Batman Vengeance of Bane #1 in January 1993. So
great villain.
Everyone knows Bane, but I don't know who knows who Azrael is.
Yeah, I don't really recognize. I do recognize the name because I think he was in one of the games that I played.
He is, yeah. He's in Arkham City and Arkham Knight. And Arkham Origins. He's in all three. He's a big Batman character. He's a major Batman character, but he's always flown under the radar. He's never got a screen debut. Very unfortunate, if you ask me. And we're going to talk a little bit about him right now for this reason. Jean-Paul Valley was a Gotham University student who discovers he has been unconsciously trained since birth as an assassin by an ancient religious order called the Order of Purity, and becomes a hero using his skills to help others. So instead of going to...
His main weapon is purity rings. He's a virgin.
Yes, he throws them at people. No. He is an interesting story of he was fast line to be a villain, and he said, screw that, I'm going to be a hero. Like, why would I hurt people? I'm going to help them. So he just became a hero. He used his skills to fight others. On the other side of the coin, Bane is an orphan born and raised in a Central American island prison and experimented on to become a super soldier and decided to break out and dethrone Batman, seeing him as the king of Gotham.
Yep.
And
Bane's a wonderful fucking villain because like he's not only obviously incredibly physically like fit and he's so strong, but he's a genius too.
Yeah, he's a genius. Yeah.
That's like a common like mistake that adaptations, Batman and Robin,
made.
He was a dopey, skinny guy, jacked up with liquid steroids.
Yeah, which wasn't even the original Bane. Bane didn't do the Venom until later. That was he was a super soldier, like Captain America style. That was his thing.
Yes. Yeah. Which was way cooler.
Yeah. So this comic's famous moment is a scene when Bane breaks Batman's back.
Yep.
You've probably all seen it if you're a Batman fan. He picks up Batman and breaks his back over his knee and says, "I will break the bat" out loud. This paralyzes Batman from the waist down.
They actually did this as well in The Dark Knight
Rises. Did it in The Dark Knight Rises, but it's much worse in the comics. Batman can't walk after this. Yeah. And this lasted like almost a year. Like Batman couldn't walk in the comics. So during this time, he entrusted his cowl to Azrael, making Azrael officially the second Batman.
That's so cool.
People don't even realize this. No one remembers this character has happened. For like a year and a half in the comics, Azrael was Batman, and he was a very tech-heavy Batman. If you look up Azrael Batman's suit, it looks rad as fuck, firstly.
Cool.
And secondly, it's super tech-heavy. He's got like a ribbon-style cape. Like it's like a bunch of like separated cape instead of like a big flowing cape. He's like blue and gold. He's covered like armor. He was a much more violent Batman. He would put people as close to death as he could.
Oh, jeez.
And while Batman recovered from this eventually, he ended up at the end of the Nightfall arc defeating Bane himself. Batman, not Bruce Wayne, Azrael, beat Bane in a fight, which proved to Bruce Wayne he made a great decision in giving him the cowl, but then Bruce Wayne shows up walking again, and the scene is a great scene where Azrael willingly kneels, takes the cowl off, and hands it back to Bruce Wayne.
Oh,
he didn't fight for it all.
That actually like makes me emotional.
Yeah, he said I'm not the Batman, you're the Batman. And so Azrael stayed in the comics from this point on. He's still a character. He's his own character. He usually has a magic sword. He's gone through a couple. He's in stuff. He's just not in movies and shows.
Right. Yeah.
He has a magic sword usually nowadays. He wears he's not Jean-Paul Valley anymore. This was the end of Jean-Paul Valley Azrael. A different Azrael's take up the suit as time goes on. But he's always a good guy. In 1995, 1995, we're in the 90s. Batman would be hit with his first major loss since the 50s. With the release of Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever.
Oh no! Yeah.
So this movie was.
As a kid, I liked it because I liked it when I was 4 years old because I was like Batman, yay!
Yeah, I loved it as a kid. This was produced by Tim Burton, but that was his only efforts in it. And this film would star Val Kilmer as Batman, and Tommy Lee Jones as
terrible. Yeah, honestly, like Val Kilmer was not a terrible.
Not
Batman,
bad, not good though. I would say.
No.
He's just a very.
And also, Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, alongside Jim Carrey as the Riddler, just being copies of Joker. This would be the first and still only appearance of Robin in a major film, with this and its sequel, played by Chris O'Donnell.
Yeah.
It would be the highest grossing movie of 1995, however, grossing a total of $336.53 million, above Dark Knight or The Batman Returns. And it would make it a commercial success. However, it would be a critical failure at a 5 out of 10 average.
Right.
This yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like, because you kind of touched on it a little bit, that like the villains were very much basically copies of Joker, but especially Two-Face. Like Two-Face in this, like, I don't know what Tommy Lee Jones was doing. I don't think he even wanted to do the fucking project, to be honest. Honestly, I really think that like Tommy Lee Jones was like, oh, this is just a paycheck.
Well, the thing is, Tommy Lee Jones could play a good Joker, or a good Two-Face, sure. Or Joker. Sure. But like he could do it. It seemed like the direction was so off.
Oh, totally. Like one of my favorite villains in Batman is the Riddler as well. So like I loved Jim Carrey's like adaptation at the time.
Well, even nowadays, he's not that bad of a Riddler because the Riddler is is a silly, very silly character.
Oh, sure. And again, and like of all, like there were some things about that movie that were okay, and like I'm not saying that all of the Riddler was good in that movie, but like Jim Carrey's being a phenomenal actor that he is, and being a comedy actor too, like made it tolerable. Like if you go back and watch it as an adult with the perspective of it, like you'll laugh and be like, this is a terrible movie, but then you'll be like, all right, well, Jim Carrey was in it. So
it's not a good movie. I have my little write-up review here. Extremely campy Batman movie that was more reminiscent of Adam West's 1966 show than the darker Batman we fell in love with before this. Featuring bright and colorful lights, making Gotham literally like Technicolor at night. And a boisterous Joker clone version of Two-Face with Riddler following very close behind that. Val Kilmer is the most unremarkable Batman in the history of Batmans and struggles to fill the shoes of Michael Keaton, who he
just has sexy lips.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. He's trying to convince the audience he's the same Bruce Wayne with a different face.
Actually, yes. Yeah, that's true.
Because this is the same Batman.
I don't mean to, usually we try not to talk to Chad here necessarily, but Soundwave just said Tommy also hated Jim Carrey, which is very true. Tommy Lee Jones fucking hated working with Jim Carrey, which definitely made the film not
it made having bad actor chemistry can destroy a whole movie. I think it does do a big hit to this movie.
Definitely.
But let's just say, right after this, we got one of the best Batman comics of all time after this, since The Killing Joke, which is another one of my favorites, definitely in my top 5, probably number 2. Which is The Long Halloween.
Oh,
so this comic is a 13-issue miniseries that spanned a whole year from 96 to 97, where Batman investigates a murder by the mysterious killer known as Holiday, and subsequent murders that happen on every major holiday for a whole year, working alongside his friend Commissioner Gordon and District Attorney Harvey Dent. So this is not only... maybe my top... I think it might be my top Batman comic of all time, but it features... as the main inspiration for the 2022 film The Batman. I also want to give honorable mentions in this year to, which also, by the way, just go read Long Halloween. It's fantastic. If you watch The Batman and read Long Halloween, you'd be like, oh. I want to give honorable mentions to Mark Waid's 1996 4-issue miniseries Kingdom Come, which is a Superman comic, but it is The Dark Knight Returns for Superman. It is a very dark version, the darkest we've seen of Superman, who, much like the Batman Dark Knight Returns, it features Superman returning to work after retiring to put other heroes who have gone to killing villains back in their place. And this shows one of my all-time favorite versions of Batman, who is featured in it almost as much as Superman. And this whole comic, you don't know if he's good or bad. That's the Batman take. Like, is he a villain or is he a good guy? Like, what's going on here? So it's a very good comic. Do recommend reading it. Right. Kingdom Come. Okay. So it's not a Batman comic, but I wanted to mention it in here because it's such a good Batman.
Right.
1997, we saw the unfortunate release of a film called Batman and Robin, under the direction of Joel Schumacher, without the production assistance of Tim Burton for the first time, which would be the final part of the 4-movie-long franchise started by Tim Burton in 1989.
Chill. Y'all need to chill.
Time to freeze. This should have frozen before it came out, but unfortunately, it released.
I watched this movie so many times.
Me too. I loved it as a kid, and then I watched it. I think the most recent time I watched it was like 4 years ago, and what a travesty!
I have not seen it since I was a kid, but it's only because I've only heard terrible things, and I'm like, I kind of just want to keep the romanticized version that I have.
That was my same version until I rewatched it, and I was like, no. So this was star George Clooney as Batman this time, replacing Val Kilmer, once again being the same Batman as Michael Keaton with a different face.
Yep.
Alongside the returning Chris O'Donnell as Robin, with the newly cast Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl.
Yeah.
The villains would be Poison Ivy, played by Uma Thurman. Mr. Freeze, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, as we just referenced, giving the time to freeze lines, and featuring Robert Swenson as Bane. This film would gross 238.2 million, being the lowest of all Batman films, and be critically one of the worst superhero movies of all time, with an average of 3.8 out of 10.
Yep. George Clooney to this day apologizes for it.
Yes. It is an overly campy return to Batman that was made much worse, and with a Batman not even George Clooney could save, with the great bat nipples and the bat card that he had. He's a bat credit card. You know what I mean? Like, it's just...
Yeah, it's so dumb.
Yeah.
What killed the dinosaurs?
The Ice Age!
That's so good.
So
bad.
That movie came out. It was terrible, but the 90s did wrap up on a positive note in the comic side of things with the series Dark Victory coming out, which is a sequel to the famous Long Halloween, which this time would involve Robin, where Batman and Robin, this is Dick Grayson Robin, would try to solve the mystery of a killer known as Hangman. Wouldn't call it a must-read. But it's
about Hangman, though.
It's a run-of-the-mill Batman mystery. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. If you want to read a Batman comic, it's very classic Batman and Robin fighting crime. It's a good one to go in.
Heck yeah.
Which now is going to bring us into the final part of tonight's episode, which is part 6, 2000 to now. Which is this is a big 20 years of Batman we're going to go through. 22 years.
Yeah.
2000 opens up with a very famous Batman comic called Batman Ego. This is
I don't know this.
Ego is a psychological trip comic. It is the story focusing on the inner struggle of Batman and Bruce Wayne's psyche, and which one is superior, which one is his actual identity, and which one is his mask.
Cool concept.
Yeah, it just basically highlights how much of a head case Bruce Wayne is, and is also referenced as a heavy inspiration alongside Long Halloween by Matt Reeves for his 2022 film, The Batman.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so Ego and Long Halloween basically are what made up this recent Batman movie. In 2001, we saw The Dark Knight Strikes Again. This is a comic sequel to The Dark Knight Returns, written by Frank Miller again. We mentioned it before, super dark, big comic, changed comics forever, right? So,
right.
Dark Knight Strikes Again is a story of Batman recruiting some of his old JLA buddies, such as the Atom and the Flash, to take down Lex Luthor and Brainiac, who are working together while Superman has a midlife crisis about whether or not he's a puppet or not, so he can't partake in this.
Okay.
The comic story isn't good. It's not terrible, but it's not good. But the art is done in an extremely childlike, newspaper-esque cartoon style, where all the characters have large heads and big fists making POW signs, while still featuring very bloody fights.
Okay.
And it's extremely clashing, and in my opinion, absolutely terrible. And
it's like Wind Waker meets Resident Evil.
Yes, and it just ruins the whole book. The plot itself wasn't good, and the art did it no favors. The book sold horribly and is largely forgotten. Frank Miller pretty much doesn't acknowledge it anymore.
Probably is for the best.
Yeah. But in 2003, we saw Batman's return to grace in another favorite of mine, Hush. Batman issue number 608 to 619 was an 11-issue arc featuring a new Batman villain, Hush, and a mystery to find out who he is and how and why he is terrorizing Batman and Bruce Wayne both, seemingly able to do so without issue, and acknowledging the fact that he knows Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Right.
Highly recommend reading this. There is a 2019 animated film of Hush that is very good. It changes major plot points, but I think it's good. It has a completely different ending to the comic, which is good. I think so. It makes it two separate stories. It's not bad. The 2019 version is not bad at all. It does it its own way. But it changes like the identities of some of the characters. Like Hush is a different person in the comics than he is in the animated film, for example. But Hush is also kind of hinted at in the 2022 Batman movie. 2003. End of this year, it comes out with one of my favorite comics of all time, Superman, Batman, Public Enemies.
This one too. Yeah.
This got a 2009 animated film, which is fantastic. It's directly the same plot as the movie. I recommend watching it if you don't want to read it. This is a great team-up comic of all, one of the best team-up comics of all time, and it is issues number 1 through 6 of the new comic series, Superman and Batman, and would tell the story of a newly elected president, Lex Luthor, offering.
Oh, yep,
Yep,
that's right.
yep. He offers a $1 billion bounty on Superman and Batman. This comic highlights the way these two work together better than any other comic, I think. And it basically has every villain from their world coming at him, trying to kidnap him and bring him back to Lex Luthor.
I've always, I have some choice opinions about Superman. I don't hate Superman, but I've always been, I think that's silly to hate Superman, but I've always been like, my favorite adaptations of Superman have been when he's with Batman, like those team ups, or like when they're even fighting each other. Like I've always liked when they're together because I always thought the contrast was always very important to have because Superman is the light.
Yeah, and it is not only light and dark, but on the power spectrum, they're on each end.
Right, exactly.
From human to God, you know what I mean? Like, so seeing them work together is very unique. It's a very unique setup.
And oftentimes they need each other.
Yeah, 100%.
Superman, so beautiful.
Superman needs Batman to ground him back to reality sometimes, because Superman is a god in a sense, and it's hard for him sometimes to remember that he needs to be a man. He has the perfect moral compass, and when it starts to shake, Batman brings him back down.
Right.
And Batman is so dark and self-hating and loathing that Superman is to be like, come on, man. Let's go punch some villains. Let's go beat up Joker. Kind of thing.
Go do what you're good at.
Like, he's really good at lifting Batman out of his dark place.
Yeah.
He's also Batman also has mentioned that Superman is his inspiration. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he sees Superman as like the ideal superhero, right? Like the perfect man. So Batman is literally like really he's a fan of Superman. So and they're best friends at the comics. Like they know it. They hang out in the Batcave. They hang out in Metropolis. They go on dinners and stuff. There's a ton of comics featuring that kind of thing. Like it is legitimately in the comics. So like, they're really good friends, and it makes a very good relationship between the two.
Oh yeah. Again, I think that's always been my probably favorite part about Superman is his relationship with Batman.
Yeah. So next we're going to 2004. We see Batman Broken City, which is a comic series, issues number from Batman issues 620 to 625. This isn't like a very famous one, but I want to mention it because I really like it. This is Batman investigates the murder of a woman named Elizabeth, who he sees having a giant bite mark on her, so he immediately thinks Killer Croc did it. Right. And he finds out that was true. Killer Croc did do it, but he was hired by her brother Angel to kill her. And when he confronts Angel and chases him through an alleyway, he seemingly kills a man and his wife, leaving their child alone in the alleyway in the chase. For obvious reasons, this heavily triggers Bruce and stops him in his path. I said Bruce here, not Batman, for a reason. And we see him more vulnerable than ever before in this series. Right. And this has a version of Batman who doubts his every move, and he loses his confidence. It's a great take on Batman that I think is very unique to this. I've not seen it since. So I recommend checking out Batman Broken City if you want to look into that kind of a very dour Batman who lacks his normal confident self.
That's something I could probably read.
Mental health reasons. It's a great mental health comic too. It is because he comes out of it, of course.
I'd relate.
Yeah, the same year in the comics, Tim Drake's father discovers he's Robin, and demands him hang up the suit for good, which Tim agrees to because he wants to be a good son, because he's a good superhero, right? He's Robin. He's not going to break his dad's wishes. Bruce supports the idea to follow his son's wishes. He hangs up the suit, which at the time, his kind of girlfriend, Stephanie Brown, who is a side hero known as the Spoiler, would break into the Batcave herself and speak to Batman, where she would take on the mantle of Robin, becoming the fourth and most forgotten Robin.
Yeah, I didn't even know this happened.
Stephanie Myers, love her character. She's a great Robin. Her costume is sweet. It was great to see a female Robin. Honestly, a role where a woman can take very well. You know what I mean?
She went on to write the Twilight series.
She went on to write Twilight? No. She's only in the comics for about 2 months as Robin.
That's a cool idea, though, honestly.
But, yeah, she's a little too wild. So, she's the daughter of another supervillain.
Oh.
And she becomes Spoiler in the comics back in the 90s to help Batman beat that supervillain. Cool. So she's been a healer. I love Spoiler, too. She's still in the comics as Spoiler. Great character. Sweet costume. She's part of the Bat family in large. So next we have 2004 with the release of the book Identity Crisis, which is my favorite DC event of all time. I have a physical copy of it on the shelf. Absolutely love Identity Crisis. This focuses on the story of Ralph Dibny, the elongated man, and the mysterious murder of his wife. So when you have a mysterious murder, who do you call? Batman.
Your mom.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Batman. Not my mom. My mom would be terrible at it. The comic would involve almost the entire DC hero and villain roster. It is a massive cast in this comic. It went on for a very long time, the entirety basically 2004, and it includes Tim Drake's father being murdered by Captain Boomerang. Now, when this happens, with the death of his father, he puts the Robin mantle back on, and a path of vengeance against Captain Boomerang gets set straight by Batman. Stephanie lost the mantle just before this after disobeying Batman's orders, so it was open. So Batman puts him back in line, he makes him Robin again. Tim Drake doesn't kill Captain Boomerang, but does get him arrested.
Hey, that's good.
And because of him now being an orphan, Bruce Wayne takes him on as his third ward.
Gotcha.
So, at any crisis, I cannot recommend enough. If you like Batman, if you like Superman, if you like the Elongated Man, it's got Flash, it's got Green Lantern, Black Lightning, it's got so many great characters. Everyone is in this. It's a huge... Because Ralph Dibny, the Elongated Man, is a comic relief character, and his wife gets killed. And he's Mr. Fantastic at DC, basically. And he's a stretchy, right? There's two stretchy characters, Elongated Man and Plastic Man. They hate each other. It's hilarious. They both are heroes, though. So the whole Justice League gets involved in figuring out one of their members' wife's getting killed. And it is a crazy story. Absolutely insane. Definitely recommend reading it. So the next year, 2005, Batman comes back in a big way to the big screen with Batman Begins.
Is the theme?
Yeah, those two notes. That's the theme. Christopher Nolan directed this film starring Christian Bale as the Batman, with Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon, going against Scarecrow, played by Cillian Murphy, and Ra's al Ghul, played by Liam Neeson.
So good.
Yes, it's such a good movie. This movie was a huge hit and showed the darkest version of the Batman on screen we'd ever seen. Despite Christian Bale's hilarious Batman voice, it did manage to carry the Batman in a way that would see an average of 8 out of 10 and gross a total of $373.7 million. Still not as high as 1989 Batman, by the way.
Yep.
With Batman's big screen success, the comics were no different. For this same year, another huge comic came out, Batman Under the Hood.
Oh, I know this one.
This was Batman issues 635 to 641, which would see the return of the resurrected Jason Todd, the former Robin, from Ra's al Ghul's Lazarus Pit under the new anti-hero alias, the Red Hood, taking his name from the old identity of Joker. You know who Red Hood is. I know who Red Hood is. A lot of people listening to this who know comics and Red Hood is. He is such a popular character. He's the Batman family's bad boy.
Yeah.
He's got guns. He kills. He's like the Punisher, kind of. Like, he doesn't give a fuck. He's just the Red Hood. Great character. Yeah. Jason Todd comes back and is edgy as ever. A little crazy about the Lazarus Pit. Never fully recovers from that. He's all scarred up on the face, too.
Right.
Next year, we got 2006, which is Batman and Son in Batman 655 to 658, which revealed that 10 years ago, Batman had a son unknown to him with Talia al Ghul, daughter of Ra's al Ghul, who was grown in an artificial womb, using quote-unquote DNA that she quote-unquote gathered from Batman.
They banged.
I don't think he knew they did, but they did.
Yeah, well, that's like the thing.
Yeah, so their son, Damian Wayne, would be introduced in this comic series and put under the care of Bruce Wayne after the League of Assassins gets heavily damaged and Talia doesn't want him around what's going on. That's what they say. There's a much more sinister reason, but we're not going to talk about that. That's spoilers. Damian Wayne ends up stealing Jason Todd's retired Robin suit and gear, and with his League of Assassins sword, ends up killing supervillain named Spook by cutting off his head.
Neat.
Batman is not happy about this and chases him down, but during the chase, in a very scene reminiscent to Jason Todd's event, the warehouse Damian Wayne is in explodes, critically injuring Damian Wayne, but this time Batman got him out in time. However, he was so injured he needed to have multiple organ transplants, which luckily this was provided by the League of Assassins, who came in to give him organs, probably from their own members. They just killed to give him the organs. I mean, they fit a 10-year-old, so they probably killed kids, actually, now that I think about it.
Great.
Yeah, he remains in Batman's care under careful watch, but has his Robin suit and sword taken away and access to the Batcave removed. And he would be showing up in the comics, but mostly under a very watchful eye and a very rash and unruly kid that makes Jason Todd look like the most tame child in existence.
Right.
2008 was another huge year for Batman with the release of Batman R.I.P., hitting the shelves, being one of Batman's most popular stories of this day. This ran from Batman numbered 676 to 681, and this story was written by famous comic writer and personal favorite of mine who I mentioned before, who did Arkham Asylum, Grant Morrison.
Right.
And this Batman investigates a mysterious Black Glove Society, and the comic ends with his death. We saw the major DC event, Final Crisis, also hit this year, which reveals Darkseid taking over the multiverse and features a major old Batman, revealing that he, in fact, did not die at the end of R.I.P., but was immediately taken away with the JLA business in a wild adventure, which I'm not going to spoil. But let's just say he doesn't let him call home, so the Bat family thinks he's dead.
Got it.
We also saw this year the release of the biggest Batman movie of all time, The Dark Knight.
Yeah, man.
Yes.
It is very good.
Yes, The Dark Knight would come out being the second in the Nolan Batman trilogy, with Christian Bale returning as Batman, going against two of his most prolific villains, the Joker, played by Heath Ledger, and Two-Face, played by Aaron Eckhart. This film would smash the box office, breaking records for superhero films, grossing a total of $1.005 billion.
Yeah, rightfully so. Deserved.
Yes,
Very deserved.
100%.
Like, not just the performances alone, but the production value, the music, the pacing, the story.
Yes.
Just fucking unbelievable.
You also-
I know, everybody knows this, though.
You also don't need to even see the first one to see this movie,
It's true. Yeah.
because we know the Batman origin.
Yeah, we know where he comes from.
Yeah, we know you know the story in the alley. So, like, if you know that, you can watch this movie and you're perfectly fine.
Yep.
Which I think helped making it so big.
Right, I think so too. I mean, like, again, I loved Batman Begins, and like, I think that if you watch them together, it makes The Dark Knight even better.
Oh, 100%.
But like, yeah, it is very much standalone-ish, you know.
Yeah, and just to round that out, it was the fourth movie of all time to break $1 billion. And it averaged a
what were the other
rating
ones?
of
Titanic?
I don't remember the other one. I just remember Titanic. But it did average a rating of 9 out of 10, which is huge.
Yep.
After this exploded Batman comics again. I actually was reading Batman comics actively this time, and I remember Dark Knight ads in the comics. Like halfway through the comic, you would see like the Joker standing over the burning. You know what I'm talking about? That like burning Batman logo with Heath Ledger standing over it. That ad. It was in like every comic for a long time.
I had that poster on my ceiling, actually.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I have such distinct memories of that from reading comics at the time. After this, we saw the famous author Neil Gaiman write a 2-piece Batman story. And this story would cross comics in Batman issue 686 and Detective Comics issue 853, and would show characters from all over Batman's history explaining why it was them who killed the Batman, and serve as an homage to an old David V. Reed story in the 60s, or sorry, I think the 70s, in which a Batman comic where his villains would explain why it was them who killed Superman. So it was funny because as readers, if you've been reading the canon story going forward, you know Batman's alive, but all these characters are claiming responsibility, like Killer Croc and the Joker and Clayface and Two-Face, saying like they killed the Batman. It's good. Neil Gaiman,
not dead.
Neil Gaiman, of course, is a very famous author, so it was a very big deal to have him write this. The art is phenomenal as well. This was a story called "What Happened to the Caped Crusader." By the way, if you want to look it up, it's a very short story, but it's printed in its own little bit now. 2009, the next year, we saw a comic miniseries called "Battle for the Cowl." Do you know what this is?
No.
Okay, so I loved Battle for the Cowl. It doesn't feature Batman, but it is a fantastic comic where Michael starts off with a character named Michael Lane, who was involved in the events of R.I.P., believes himself responsible for the death of Batman, which he wasn't, but he thinks he was. And he is taken to the Order of Purity and given the mantle of the next Azrael to atone for his sins. He then soon battles Nightwing after being wrongly accused of the murder of Batman, but they end up making up and being friends of it, and they realize what happened. Black Mask II soon takes control of Arkham and sends out villains to work for him, which kind of they have now this organized villain attack because they're noticing Batman's not around anymore.
Right.
Damian gets attacked by Killer Croc and is rescued by Nightwing, who then gets attacked by Batman.
What?
So during this fight, it is revealed that Batman is Jason Todd, who has his own Batman suit, and Damian gets shot and severely wounded by Jason Todd in this encounter.
Oh, God.
Who shows up at the nick of time but Alfred to save young Master Damian Wayne, bringing him back to the Batcave and heal his wounds. This leads to Tim Drake putting on the cowl and becoming Batman temporarily, to trying to take on Jason Todd, but again getting severely wounded and captured, proving no match for Jason Todd.
Right.
Alfred then sends to heal Damian and Squire, who, if you remember, in the 60s we mentioned the character the Shining Knight.
Yes.
This is his apprentice called Squire. He's really lame. He looks like a little like medieval's boy. Like, I'm here to save the day. He goes to Damian Wayne's because he's worried about Damian being alone. He's the only hero available at the time to go save Tim Drake. But in the end, they are successful when Nightwing shows up to battle Jason Todd and ends up winning.
Good.
Jason Todd survives by falling into the Gotham River, ending the comic with him saying, "I'll see you soon, Dick," as he floats away. And the comic actually ends with Dick Grayson donning the cowl to become the third Batman. Damian Wayne is given the mantle of Robin after Dick tells Tim that he can't be Robin anymore because he's on too equal ground with Dick. So he leaves to become a new hero known as Red Robin.
Oh, okay.
Which is what he is to this day. So yeah, the last comic we're going to go over 2000s is Batman and Robin Reborn, which I love because this whole series is Batman as Dick Grayson. And
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
he's a great Batman. So this comic is a 3-part series. Batman and Robin Reborn issues 1 through 3, where you get to see Dick as the positive Batman and Damian as the negative Robin, which swishes the dynamic around.
Yeah.
And it's a very good read, especially if you like the idea of Batman being Dick Grayson, which I love, just to get a little change in the normal pace. As well as what kind of Robin Damian is, which is pretty dark. He uses a sword. The same time of this release, you would see Rocksteady's Arkham Asylum game come out across all platforms.
Yay.
Which would cause a very unexpected hit to emerge Batman as a major character in the video game world.
Yeah, I mean, as a Batman fan, when that came out, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised that other people were surprised that the game was good.
I was
like,
surprised that the
Batman,
game was good because Batman's been in stuff before, but nothing to this level. You know what I mean? This is a really well cared for game. And like even to this day, when people like post like favorite characters in video games, just characters like Cloud and like Link, Batman's there a lot.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just Batman, and I'm like, that's so weird to me. He's just in this now, like, world
Echelon
of...
of
Yeah, echelon of...
like,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, 2010 saw the biggest change in DC Comics. It's Infinite Crisis with the comic known as The Flashpoint.
Oh, I know.
This would be the story of Flash going back in time to save his mother from getting killed in the past by Reverse Flash, which fucked up the timeline extremely hard. Batman
I
is...
jerked you off.
yes, that meme is that animated movie. The animated movie is great too. If you want a very quick rundown of this movie, it's basically exactly the same with this comic. I mean, so this ended. I'm just gonna say Batman's a huge part of this, including Thomas Wayne Batman, a lot of people's very famous version of Batman. As part of the story. So this comic ends in a massive comic event known as the New 52. Where the multiverse of DC was culled down to officially having only 15 different universes, 52 different universes in the multiverse.
52?
Yeah, only 52. Along with the launch of 52 comic lines and continuation of some that were still going. It was less than they had before.
True, yeah, well, true, yeah.
They cut out all their like chaff that wasn't selling, and they put forward just 52 comics.
That's probably a good thing.
It would start with multiple lines of Batman, which is all we're going to talk about today. Which was Detective Comics, Batman, Batman and Robin, and then a new series called The Dark Knight. The relaunch would see Bruce Wayne return from his supposed death, and Dick Grayson handing the cowl back to him and returning to identity of Nightwing, who also got his own series in the 52 comics. Damian Wayne would continue his life as Robin, which he still is Robin today. Outside of this, in a one-shot, and the only major Batman comic 2011 is Batman Noel. Have you heard of this comic?
No.
So I think it's really fun. It's a really dark comic. It's just like, it's so funny that it exists, and it's good. This is a Christmas comic that is the retelling of Charles Dickens' 1984 classic novella, A Christmas Carol, as Batman.
What?
It's a Batman comic telling of the same story.
That's pretty funny.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty dark. It's pretty messed up, but it's good. The comic cover art is fantastic with like Batman's mask cracked in half, like the snow falling on it.
Okay.
This is the same year we also got Arkham Asylum sequel, Arkham City by Rocksteady Games, which would do even
That's the
better.
last one I played.
It would do better than the first. It was an instant hit. I loved it too.
So good.
Yeah, this was great. This allowed you to play as Batman and his on and off love interest and on and off villain, Catwoman.
Yeah.
2012, the next year, we're going to see a hugely popular and favorite comic of mine come out called Batman: The Court of Owls. So, do you know about The Court of Owls?
I do not.
Oh, I'm actually surprised. This is very huge. You can get it now in a solid book called The Court of Owls Saga. They did make I think they made 2 animated movies that take place with this. It heavily involves Batman and Damian Wayne. This would be the first major comic event under the banner DC's New 52. And it would feature a new group of villains who have always been present since the beginning in the shadows of Gotham, known as the Court of Owls. It includes plenty of references to the facts that owls prey on bats, a lot of creepy secret society stuff, involvement of the whole Bat family. This is a 10 out of 10 comic. I recommend everyone read it who hasn't read it yet.
Yeah, I've never even heard of it.
It's so good. The next game coming out, Gotham Knights, is the Court of Owls plot. So that is going to be great. This is the same year we saw the release of Dark Knight Rises, which would be the final film in the Nolan trilogy, starring Christian Bale again as Batman, going against Bane, portrayed by Tom Hardy. Now, I was raised in the dark, molded by it. So this movie it got a ratings of 8.2 out of 10. It grossed even higher than The Dark Knight with $1.081 billion.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, got more money, didn't get as high of ratings, not as good of a movie overall, still a great movie.
Yeah. Oh, still good.
Love it to death. I would think Bane is fantastic in this movie, despite all the jokes about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Well, there was somebody did a great observation recently where, like, at first when you hear the Bane voice, it does come off as very comedic and kind of funny. But what makes it actually terrifying as the movie goes on is that when he speaks, it cuts through all the other sound. So even though it's muffled and it sounds and it sounds kind of silly, after a while you start associating it with terror because it literally cuts through like the ambiance of the room that they're in. They hang out in the sewer a lot in that movie, so like it just cuts through it. But it's very creepy.
I legitimately think they made him sound silly to meet Christian Bale's silly Batman voice. I actually think they did that. I think they kind of made it balance out Batman's, I'm not wearing hockey pants. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. Like, because I hate his voice so much. I love the movies. I'm sorry. It's hilarious.
Oh, I know. I'm with you. I always thought that the idea that Christian Bale thought it was, or Christopher Nolan, whoever's idea it was, to make his voice so gravelly. Like, I understand changing the voice. I get that.
Yeah.
But like, and no spoilers, but like Robert Pattinson, he kind of changes his voice a little bit too when he
does it the best I think I've ever seen a Batman do it.
Oh yeah,
it's subtly different, but it's not like this deep gravelly Christian Bale level. Yeah,
it's not who I am, but what I do or something underneath.
I'm not wearing hockey pants. So this movie would release to be Christian Bale's farewell to the cowl and the end of an era in Batman films.
A very nice sort of full story,
yes,
too. You know,
a complete little trilogy. Each movie is fantastic. You can go back and watch them in order and have a great time today. I'm glad it ended. I'm very glad it came to an ending because it could have gone the Batman and Robin route. You know what I mean? Like destroyed itself. Oh, yeah. So luckily they didn't. Like
there was a lot of people who wanted it because at that time Man of Steel was announced. Mm-hmm. So people were assuming that, this Batman, Christian Bale, is going to eventually meet up with Superman. Not the case.
No, would have been great.
Which I'm very happy about.
It would have been great, but also, yes, I'm the same way. I'm glad this ended, and a neat little bow tie ending.
Yes.
What's next? Let's see. We had the same year, the Joker returned to the New 52 in a comic called The Death of the Family. This was a massive arc that spawned 23 comics across 9 different series. It's a fantastic comic, and it features the series that it expands across are Batman, Batgirl, Batman and Robin, Catwoman, Detective Comics, Nightwing, Suicide Squad, Red Hood and the Outlaws, and Teen Titans.
Teen Titans, go!
So a lot of people listening might have heard of this story. You might just not know what the name is. It's called Death of the Family, but this is the famous story where Joker cuts off his own face. There's a lot of images of Joker holding up his own face with his eyes peering in the background. It reaches a whole new level of dark. If you're into that, I recommend checking this series out. I actually read this as it was coming out, like issue by issue, and I loved it. I even picked up issues of the other comics, like I would never buy, like Suicide Squad, and read it for it, just for this. But it was good. It's a great comic series. The next year, in 2013, we had Batman Year Zero come out. Now, as opposed to Year 1, Year Zero was made to redefine Batman's origin in the New 52 comics, and this was another massive crossover event that would last a whole year and even include a very pointless Superman issue where he goes to dinner with Lois in Gotham and sees the power go out that relates to the story going on. It's not great, but it's a fun read if you like seeing early Batman. You even get some capeless Batman fighting at the beginning.
Oh, cool.
This same year, we got Arkham Origins, which is the prequel game to the Arkham series, featuring Deathstroke as the villain, which I love, which drove me to the game.
I never played anything after City, unfortunately.
I played
Not
Arkham
because I didn't want to.
Yeah, I played Arkham Origins. It was good. It's not great. It's worse than City, but it's not a bad game.
Right, that's what I heard.
Yeah, a lot more difficult. Specifically, Deathstroke fight is hair ripping. The next major Batman event would be 2015, where we would again see the sequel to the Arkham, which would come out with the Arkham Knight. So this is the final part of the series. I haven't played it myself, but this is widely known to be the best game in the series.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
It got open world Gotham. You get to drive around the Batmobile. You get to play as Robin and Nightwing and Harley Quinn. So it's got some interesting stuff in it. I want to play it. I definitely will at some point.
Yeah, I'd like to play that too.
Yeah, it's good, I'm sure. 2016, we saw an unfortunate disaster in a movie called Batman vs Superman.
Martha, what'd you say? What's that name?
Who's Martha? This movie was made by Zack Snyder and is a sequel to a Superman film, Man of Steel. This movie is abysmal in many ways and is full of terrible casting mistakes. It introduces Ben Affleck's Batman, which I don't mind myself.
I didn't mind it.
He's the Frank Miller Batman we got, the old man Batman. Same. He's even got the fat man logo, as people call it, which is the big thick Batman.
Yeah.
That's from Frank Miller, directly from Frank Miller's Batman.
Yeah.
Dark Knight Returns. It introduced Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman and had the return of Henry Cavill as Superman, and the horrible Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor.
Oh God, that was so.
It was
bad.
the worst depiction of Lex Luthor ever made. I don't know how that got past anybody. It was terrible.
Yeah,
it's just the Joker. It's just the Joker.
They
he's
made
just
him
playing
seem
the
like-
Joker.
yeah.
He's not
Except
bald.
it's like he's a Silicon Valley tech guy.
Which is
like-
fine, but he's not even bald.
Also, the way right, and also he's got like hair.
He's
like
got
me.
long hair, which is Lex's story, but not when he's an adult. That's the whole thing is when he's an adult, he loses his hair.
Right, and and again, like the way that he fights and like he creates Doomsday by like just magically figuring out how the fuck to work Kryptonian technology.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense at all. It's
I'm
like-
so smart. This movie was so bad, it made me never trust live action DC to this day. And it did get a 5 out of 10 rating. However, it did gross $872 million, which is a lot. Unfortunately,
there are people on the internet who will fucking kill you if you tell them that's a
Yep.
bad movie.
So I'm gonna go ahead and
Makes
say
no
that.
sense.
I'm gonna say that now. This is a terrible movie. Everyone listening who thinks that.
Yeah,
However,
I don't care.
I do like Ben Affleck Batman. I think he's fine as Batman. He was not the problem. Batman, Superman, and
exactly.
Wonder Woman are not the problems in this movie. Throwing Doomsday and a Death of Superman, which should have been its own whole movie, was the problem. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah, seriously.
so this would unfortunately fund interest in sequels. Anyway, the same year, we saw DC Rebirth. So DC Rebirth is yet another attempt to relaunch DC Comics into a universe that makes any goddamn sense. Similar to the previous attempts, such as Infinite Crisis in the 80s and New 52, only 5 years prior to this, which we just talked about. They're going again. They're resetting again. This event would bring back the catastrophic event of Flashpoint in a big way where it explodes, literally, and the universes of the pre and current New 52, including the death of New 52 Superman in the end of the story, merge together with the replacement of New 52 Superman with the classic red underwear Superman from before, which I love to death, taking his place. So we had this dark, edgy Superman for a while in New 52, and he dies at the end of this comic. And he immediately, like when the universes like collide, like his body vanishes, and then in his place, alive, is the Superman that like I know from a kid, and like from the animated show, you know, like that Superman's like, what's going on, kind of thing, you know, like it connected it together. The next year, in 2017, we would see another disaster, which is called Justice League in the films.
People will tell you, they're going to tell you that the Snyder Cut's better.
I know.
They're going to tell you to watch it.
I know.
I haven't.
I watched it.
I have not watched the Snyder Cut. I watched the original, and I don't remember anything except for Gal Gadot's pronouncement of Steppenwolf. That's all I remember is Gal Gadot saying Steppenwolf. That's the only thing I can remember.
Yeah, it's a sequel to Batman vs Superman. It shows Superman returning in his classic Return of Superman, fighting against Steppenwolf, who's the son of Darkseid or whatever. I'm not going to go too much into the plot, but just know it's horrible. I think anyone should have to witness this. It is 4 to 10 rating average. It grossed $657.9 million, unfortunately, and saw the return of Ben Affleck as Batman. Again, not the problem with the movie.
Not the problem.
But it's so CG. I'm not going to get into politics. I hated the movie. Right. That's it.
I'll just say this about it. It was, you can tell it was genuinely trying to capture the same might and grace at the Marvel movies with the Avengers and stuff like that. That's the entire problem, was that like the production team at DC movies, film specifically, was sitting there going, these Avengers movies are great. Everyone's going to love the Justice League.
That's all it was. That was the problem. It wasn't its own movie. It was an attempt to be Avengers, and it fell extremely short. But that same year, we saw a lot of modern people's favorite comic lines in Batman, which would be run from 2017 to 2018, called Dark Knight's Metal. Now, this comic started as its own series called Dark Days before crossing over into Batman, Teen Titans, Nightwing, Suicide Squad, Green Arrow, The Flash, Justice League, and Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. This comic series introduces the idea of the Dark Multiverse, which is a shadow version of the existing multiverse, with darker versions of everything, and they're more edgy. This ushered in a now famously popular villain, the Batman Who Laughs, which is a different version of Bruce Wayne from a different world who's more akin to the Joker. And he travels the multiverse, the dark multiverse that is, and recruits other Bruce Waynes with various superpowers that mimic other DC heroes, such as the Drowned. I think her name is Brianna Wayne. She's a female version of Batman who was the Queen of Atlantis in that world, with Aquaman's powers. Another world where we meet the Red Death, my favorite one, which is a version of Bruce Wayne who was struck by lightning instead of Barry Allen getting the powers of the Flash. So just think of a villainous Flash, how dangerous that is.
It just sounds like it's like, let's make all the superheroes again, but it's
100%. That's what it was. It's literally what it was, and they acknowledge it. Like, it's self-aware. They go to all these different things and he gathers all these versions of them. It's a cool comic series. I like it. I think it's legitimately a good comic series. A lot of people love it. Batman Who Laughs. You might have seen him. He's wearing like BDSM spike gear. He's got like a Joker smile. He has zombie Robins on a chain, like dogs. Yeah, he's ridiculous. An absolutely insane villain. He's a cool villain. It's a good comic series. Everyone gets involved. I liked it. A lot of people really like it. I know some of our community and streams mentioned it being their favorite. So,
okay.
I know it's got likers. People like it out there. 2017 also saw the beginning of a long comic event, which I absolutely adore. That went until 2019, called the Doomsday Clock. This is written by DC's famous Jeff Johns and would feature Dr. Manhattan of The Watchmen being scared of a clock where on the hour 12 instead of number 12 is the logo of Superman. And he is terrified of this clock, and we don't know why. And the mystery is afoot when it begins the integration of the Watchmen into DC with a multiverse event and Batman teaming up with a new Rorschach to solve a mystery of what's going on.
That's interesting.
It is fantastic. If you like The Watchmen and you like Batman, read the Doomsday Clock. It is so good.
The idea that something scares Dr. Manhattan is very interesting to me, because he's like literally edgelord penis man. The
only thing stronger than God, Superman. Not really. That's not the plot. But he is scared of Superman for reasons. It features the plot, basically the Watchmen universe literally because the Watchmen's about the Cold War, and it happens.
Yeah.
The nukes launch, and Ozymandias gets away at the end in a machine. And where does it take him? But Gotham City. So like a multiverse puts him. So because DC bought Watchmen, so they're now part of the same universe.
Gotcha. I knew that.
Yeah,
like the business stuff.
It's a fantastic comic. Definitely recommend reading it. Watchmen characters show up, like the comedian's button's a big part of more modern comics as well. In DC, like they're all integrated now. In 2018, we saw a fun short comic event, which I love, which started with a large issue pre-event, which was known as The Wedding of Batman, which would see the marriage of Batman and Catwoman.
Oh, cool.
It's a very fun story. If you like the Bat family, you'll enjoy reading it, and it's written by Tom King, who was my favorite comic art writer. It takes place with basically, this starts off with there's like a comic called Nightwing versus Hush, Robin versus Ra's al Ghul. Like that's all the prelude. Like it's all these like, and again, it's like Harley Quinn versus Joker is the last one. So, which by the way, just because I didn't really talk about it, Harley Quinn's a hero now. At this time, she's full hero now.
Yeah.
There's no villain left in Harley Quinn.
There's a lot of like adaptations of Harley Quinn that goes through that, because not almost all, but a lot of her adaptations go from I'm obsessed with the Joker to wow, you're a psycho abusive psycho.
And so she broke away in around 2017-16 with the launch of Rebirth from Joker permanently. Joker got a new version called Punchline. It's a new girl that he's obsessed with. So Harley Quinn's like out. And Harley's part of the official Bat family. Like she's in the Batcave. Like she's part of the Bat family. She's with them. It's like Batman, Batwoman, Harley Quinn, Batgirl, Robin. Like they're all part of it. Even Clayface, the former villain,
still obnoxious too.
She is. Yeah, I like Harley Quinn. I appreciate her character, but I don't read Harley Quinn comics. Like she's not my absolute favorite.
But she's great. Yeah, she's a great character.
Clayface, do you know the big Mudman villain?
Oh yeah.
He's also part of the Bat family now. Full hero. Which is a great comic.
Weird.
It's such a great comic reason. I didn't even write this down. I'm going to talk about it because I love this for what they did. So originally in the comics, when he's introduced in the 60s or 50s, I can't remember which one, Batman and Robin get a call from the police that a big mud monster has invaded a Gotham movie theater. And they go in and they beat him up. He gets arrested, put into Arkham Asylum, and they find out at the end that he's an actor. He was a Hollywood actor, and what he was doing in the movie theater was watching his own movies. And they're like, what an egotistical maniac. Ha ha ha, good job, Robin. So, into that comic. Rebirth version, when that event takes place, no more modern times, it's Batman and Batwoman, not Batman and Robin, firstly, get called to go in this together. They get in there, and they see this super depressed Clayface just sitting in a seat, watching movies of himself, wishing he wasn't a monster. Because he didn't want to be Clayface. It's an accident that made him Clayface. Right. So he's like freaking out, and they're like, what are you doing breaking in? And he just goes, I'll leave and like go to jail, but can I just like finish this? And Batman and Batwoman are like, okay. And they sit with him. They sit with him and watch the movie, and they take him back to the Batcave, and he becomes a hero. Aww. So it just shows that little bit of compassion turned a lifelong villain into a lifelong hero. And I love that. Like, I love that they were able to show that. Like, he wasn't a bad guy. He was made a bad guy because Batman punched him in the face.
Well, there's a lot of, like, times where... And this is something that I think that is very powerful about, again, the new Batman with Robert Pattinson and Bruce Wayne, is that, like... And it didn't necessarily articulate in some of the previous movies. Even in the Nolan franchise, which, again, I love. I think it's fantastic. But Bruce Wayne in Batman is very, very compassionate and empathetic. And that's something that I don't think... And even though he's the Dark Knight, he's dark and gritty and stuff like that, once he figures out the motivation behind a villain, that can change his perspective. And that does change his perspective. Yeah. And I think that's always been something that... reasons I've always loved Batman is because of that exact thing.
Yeah, it's these little... It's very psychological.
Yeah.
And it's good. Batman hits this because he's a human, so it has to add more than just punching, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
If you want that, go read Superman. Though nowadays, Superman is also very psychological. So, next, we got 2018, which I already talked about that, with Catwoman and Batman and Catwoman. That's what we were talking about. So, Batman and Catwoman, the Bat family, ends in this one singular issue by Tom King where the wedding happens. It's extremely introspective. Like, the whole comic is told through their vows. Like, these letters to each other. It's really good. It's really, like, it's a heart-wrencher. Like, you really get to see deep inside Batman and Catwoman. Each panel is done by different artists who have drawn Batman through different ages.
That's cool.
So, or each page, I should say. So it's got all these famous Batman artists attached to it. It was a huge event. And the next time it was great comic. Recommend it. It's just like 5 issues. It's good to read. Next year, 2019, we saw the film The Joker release, starring Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker. This took a very new point of view on the Joker and Batman and Gotham from the view of his arch nemesis as the main character, being, of course, the Joker. The story is a very visceral, violent, R-rated spiral into insanity that would end up grossing $1.074 billion with an average of 8 out of 10 ratings, and seeing Joaquin Phoenix win the Academy Award and the Golden Globe for Best Actor of that year.
Which I'm fine with. I liked the movie a lot. I thought, and there's a lot of, one of the big things, in my opinion, I study like things like economics and politics a lot, just because I'm fascinated with how our genuine, I like the lore of our actual world. So I study that stuff sometimes, and there are so many parallels between the Joker story in that movie and like what's going on in our like American economy today. And I thought it was a little on the nose in my opinion, but I realized that not a lot of people actually study those things that I do, so a lot of people might not have picked up on it. But like,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's very connected, and it takes place in the 80s or 70s too, late 70s. Yeah, so it's like it's got this really like neo Gotham look to it, like almost like they have such high hopes for the future, but it's such a shithole, like kind of thing. You know, like it's such a terrible place. Joaquin Phoenix is excellent as the Joker. I love the idea that the Joker existed before Batman. Because it's always the other way around. It's always the Batman makes the Joker. This time we saw the Joker pretty much make the Batman. And it's a fantastic way to do the character. He is so good in it. He is so depressing. It is such a depressing movie. Like, it is just, like, it really kind of hurts your mind. But, like, it's really good. It's great in the best way. Like, you're like, gosh, like, it's so bleak and so hopeless. But
I remember watching
it's
that
so
movie,
good.
After leaving it, I remember thinking, well, I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it after watching it. I remember thinking like, well, my life's not that bad.
I literally walked out of the theater. And I remember this older woman was in front of me, and she goes, "I'm just sad now." And I was like, yeah. So that's a great film, which is the start of hopefully Batman being great in movies. 2020. We're getting real close to modern time now. We see a very major event in the comics known as the Joker War, which starts in Batman Volume 3, issue number 95, in September, ending in Batgirl Volume 5, number 50, in December, which would follow the event of Superman's identity being revealed, and Joker thinking it would be fun to switch places with Batman. Actually, the comic opens up with them seeing that on TV. This happened in Superman comics. He comes out that Clark Kent and Superman. Joker's watching on TV, and one of his goons says, "We should reveal Batman's identity," which Joker responds by killing the goon immediately, saying, "Anyone ever suggests that, I will kill you. That would ruin all the fun if everyone knew who he was." The Joker knows. I think it's pretty well established. The Joker knows who the fuck Batman is. Because Joker is extremely intelligent, too. He's just a madman.
He's just literally chaos.
Yeah, but he knows he can't ever reveal that secret. He loves the secret. He's in on it.
Yeah. He to him it's all a game.
Yeah, exactly.
Portrayed in a comic, in a really phenomenal comic strip where Batman's just like, "Look, this is going to end in one of our deaths. We got to stop." And then the Joker's, and he's like, "Look, I can come and I think he says even like, "I can rehabilitate you." And then the Joker looks at him and starts laughing, and he goes, "Nah, man." And like he's just like, that ruins us. He's like, to the Joker, the Batman and Joker relationship is like almost incredibly like emotional and like in a
100%.
And I'm using this term loosely because I don't want people to get like crazy ship things, but like it's almost like romantic, like romanticized, and it's like beautiful because of it. Not in like a like lovey-dovey couple romantic, but like in a very like what we have is beautiful. Batman, don't you see? You know, that kind of.
So the whole Batman and Catwoman wedding comic, which I didn't mention before, the first issue is the story of Joker attacking a church, and Batman comes to fight Joker. Joker ends up taking everyone hostage and accidentally killing them. It's a ridiculous scene. He sets a bomb off, which basically knocks Batman unconscious, and Catwoman shows up to save Batman and has a fight with Joker. And Joker gets his throat slashed open by Catwoman, and Joker shoots Catwoman in the gut. So they're both like laying there, holding onto their wounds, having this monologue between each other. But this whole thing, but before that even happens, before the bomb blows up, he sits there and has a gun to his own head, saying, "Batman, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to kill myself, and it's your fault." So Batman listens to him, of course, and he goes up to the altar and says, "Pray with me, Batman," and kneels. And Batman sits there and prays to his prayer, and it's like Batman's like sitting in like his hands together, you know, like in the pray motion, and he just says, he goes, "Bruce, am I your best man?" And then the bomb goes off.
Oh, that's so fucking cool.
Like, it's just like, so this whole thing is because he's pissed off that he's not the best man at the wedding.
Right. Yeah. Because yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Which it also comes out
That just gave me shivers, dude.
just for people wondering. So Clark Kent gets picked to be best man at first, but it switches to Alfred in the end.
Oh, well, that's
Which is great. Yeah, more appropriate because they end up doing an eloping thing. It's great.
That's cute.
So it's just I love the comic. There's a Night Out comic where Batman in costume and Superman in costume and Nightwing in costume go on night in the town for the bachelor party. It's great. I love it. I love seeing Superman running a bachelor party with Dick Grayson. Hush, no, he can't get drunk. Hush shows up, ruins everything. Terrible. Anyway. It's a good comic though. But yeah, so that just shows like that's the relationship. Like he just wanted to be Bruce Wayne's. He said Bruce too, not Batman. Said like heart to heart, I want to be your best man. Of course, that's insane. Like obviously that's fucking insane.
Right.
But it's just like that's Joker's point of view. Like it's
he
crazy.
Loves him. Like yeah. That's why I also like again Heath Ledger's adaptation of him back in The Dark Knight in 2008 was like phenomenal because he's like I don't want to kill you. Like what are you talking about?
Without you, there'd be no me. You know, it's just like that's the thing. It's crazy. It's great. Joker's a great villain. He's one of the greatest villains ever.
Seriously.
What do we have next here? Oh, so in August. Also, I was going to mention the Joker War comic. The whole plot is that he puts on the cowl. Joker becomes Batman. Batman becomes Joker in a crazy plot twist. It's great. If you like Batman, you'll like it because it has everyone from Gordon to Red Hood. Like everyone's in this comic. 2020 would also see the release in August of 3 Jokers, which is a independent side story focusing on the Joker. And if you're into Joker, you'll like it. This was kind of made as response to the Joaquin Phoenix movie. Like it's its own, like separate from the rest of the world, like story of 3 different Jokers. One being the clown, one being the clown prince of crime, and one being the madman. Like so, it's like one being the comedian, which is the clown one, and then the criminal one, which is the clown prince of crime, and then the madman, which is a psychotic, like Dark Knight style Joker.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Great comic. 2021 would see Infinite Frontiers. So remember how they did New 52 and didn't work out so well, so they did Rebirth. Well, they didn't think that worked out so well again, so they did it again. Another 5 years passed, and they decided to relaunch DC again, but seemingly this one is the final one. And I say that because they reset to pre-Infinite Crisis. Okay. So we're now back to where these 80s plot lines are canonized again. And they wrote it in a way to where all these 90s and 2000s, like New 52 and 2010s plot lines are canon still too, but like they were back to this original multiverse of DC, where it's not 52 universes, it's infinite, and it's just like that's the world now. Like we're back. Like stop complaining. The multiverse is a here thing. Here, that seems to be their reference. The plot of this event was the Batman who laughs gets the powers of Dr. Manhattan. Oh. Which is very bad, and he becomes something called the Darkest Knight, who is like an evil bat god. Ends up getting stopped by godlike empowered Wonder Woman, and it ushers in the pre-Infinite Crisis reality, canonizing and decanonizing stories all left and right. But I kind of like where it's at right now. I think it's got we got a good future look, because we got all these people back in their place. Wally West, for example, was back. Who that's the Flash I grew up knowing through Justice League. He was just gone. New 52 killed him. He was gone. Now he's back. Like he has a silver suit. He looks sick as fuck. I love it. It's great. So after that, 2021 to now is my favorite Batman comic maybe ever. With DC's Black Label, which I don't know if you know about DC's Black Label.
I think you mentioned it.
It's the DC logo, but it's just colored black, and it says Black Label under it, and they stamp it on comics that are meant to be for adult audiences, and they're usually very, very good, including like Doomsday Clock and Superman Year One, and Tom King, who I mentioned earlier, is my favorite writer of comics, did Batman and Catwoman in 2021, and this 12-issue run is still going on. It's on issue 10 right now, out of 12. And it is absolutely fantastic. If you have the DC Infinite app where you can read comics digitally, it's up to issue 6 on there. You can get them digitally through like Amazon or DC on their own other ways. But go to a comic shop, support the business, buy Batman and Catwoman. It's fantastic. The villain of the series is the Phantasm. In their first appearance since that movie. They were made for that movie, and now she's just back as the villain, and it's
That's cool.
wild. Like, it's so wild. Everyone's like, "Whoa!" Like, what? The Phantasm? And so this story picks up after the marriage of Batman and Catwoman comic by Tom King, which Tom King got fired after that comic for having
Why?
creative differences with the people at DC. He said that they didn't agree with a lot of his ideas, and they got really mad at him. And he said some very choice words, and he's rumored that he even threatened people there. But he says they think he's quoted as saying, like, anything I say they take as a threat because I'm a former CIA agent, which I didn't know, but there you go. But so I don't know why he got fired, but he got brought back on for this. And this takes place right after the last thing he wrote, basically to write up. He was going to put this in the mainline Batman comics. So we now get it as a side story, and it's very, very good. It's such a fantastic comic. Which brings us to 2022, and the last note, where, of course, the major thing this year is Matt Reeves' film The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson as Batman, alongside Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, going against Paul Dano as the Riddler, and Colin Farrell as the Penguin. Currently, it sits at a nice 8.5 out of 10, and has grossed 135 million domestic box office, which is pretty high. So...
It's only been out for a week.
Yeah, we don't have international yet, so it's going to explode elsewhere, I'm sure. But that's the end of the Batman timeline I have today.
Well, this is the longest Lords we've had.
Is it? Are we longer than Warhammer? I didn't know if we reached this far.
Oh yeah, we definitely blew past. Warhammer was about 2 hours, both episodes. I mean, if you put them together, it was 4 fucking hours. But like, for a single episode, this is our longest one, which is which is fine for me because I fucking love Batman. And
I think everyone does. I think I'd mentioned before I had a 13-page script for this, and this is larger than most things I do. There is also, of course, tons of Batman stories I didn't mention because there's
including
just too
Batman
many.
Beyond.
Yes, Batman Beyond I'm not a fan of, sorry. But I know people are, so I didn't mention it because I don't like Batman Beyond very much.
I liked it when I was a kid, but I tried watching it a few years ago.
I didn't because I was like, "Where's this? This is my Batman." Like, that was okay. That was my thing.
Again, it took place in like a futuristic Gotham. It was very It was trying to be like the sequel to the original animated series.
There's also another comic story which I want to read, which is out now, which I haven't read. It's like I think it just finished, or maybe it's like 2019, 2020. It's a story. I don't know what it's called exactly, but it takes place in the medieval time, where instead of Superman leaving or Kal-El getting baby Superman being put in a pod, it's a ship with his parents. So Jor-El and his mother, whose name I can't remember, land in medieval Europe and create the Kingdom of El in like where Germany is and take over all of Europe, and they fight against Kandor and Black Adam. The Black Knight is Bruce Wayne. It's revealed that he's their son too. Like Superman and Bruce Wayne are twins in this world.
Okay.
Or something like that. Like, it's crazy. Apparently it's really, really good. People are calling it one of DC's like best side stories ever written.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I want to read it, but I haven't. But again, there's another crazy Batman version where he's the Black Knight of Arthurian legend. There's too much to go into. There's too many versions of Batman. I just went through the main canon story and then what I think were the highlight picks of other ones.
Right.
I would say the biggest Batman that I didn't mention probably is Batman Beyond. A lot of people really, really like it. I get that. I honestly didn't even.
I thought the suit was cool.
Yeah, same. I like the suit too. I didn't even think of it. Right. I didn't even cross my mind on Dragon this. I just don't like it. But it's whatever. If you like it, you like it. I just personally am not a fan of Batman Beyond.
My favorite part of Batman Beyond was I think the first like 2 episodes when like it was old Batman, like old Bruce Wayne, and then finding, I don't remember the guy's name, but the kid
Terry something. I remember his last name.
Yeah. McGinnis. Terry
McGinnis. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, and I liked that origin, but like I remember as the series kept going, I just kept finding myself a little bit bored.
I also liked the reveal that Dick Grayson was the Joker. That was a cool bit of the story. Like, it's got some cool stuff, and I still watched it as a kid because I loved superhero stuff. But it just made me want more Batman animated series more than anything.
Sure, yeah.
Which, by the way, 2023 or late 2022 is returning. So
yeah, that's right.
I'm very hyped for that. Batman animated series is coming back to HBO.
Super fun.
which apparently is going to be darker and more adult. So let's
I
get
might
into
go
it.
back and rewatch the animated series. It's just so long.
Yeah, if you want to like kind of get some new bit of that in your life, what's it called? What's his name? Who made it? Bruce Timm. Bruce Timm's made a black and white Batman noir short. That's like an hour long. It's really good. It's animated. He did same, so it's the same style, same artist as the animated series.
Big chests.
Yeah, it's an all black and white. It's got a very Art Deco, Art Nouveau Gotham. Very good. Love it a lot.
I'm down with it.
But yeah, that's the end of Batman for today.
That's fantastic. I loved this episode. I again freak for Batman, big fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's if thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for read more comics. Go out there. We're gonna be doing more comic ones soon.
Oh, great.
So get into that, everyone. I hope you have a great night. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.